nonsense. As much as like the world is disintegrating around me, and I'm like just consumed with.
We're live.
Oh, we are live.
Oh,
Okay.
okay, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I already hit the button, so I'm just letting you know.
Oh, is that just so I don't launch into some tirade? How we need January 6th 2.0, because that's my jam. That's what I'm doing. All right, we are recording. Yay, it's recording.
You're listening to the Verhoeven Effect podcast. We have another very special episode. I'm Conlon.
I'm Nathan.
We have
I'm a
another
very special Nathan.
we have another very special episode. We have the 1984 film Red Dawn. Nathan,
The film that made America.
do you have a history with Red Dawn?
Well, I would have been 10 years old when it came out, and so no, I never saw this in theaters or anything. It's one of those movies like mom and dad didn't want me to watch because they were very concerned about my obsession with like nuclear war and the end of the world. Because even when I was 10 years old, I was like obsessed with it's like, what are the weapons they're using, and why, and how do we win this? And and they didn't want me to watch stuff like this. So. I don't think I watched this movie until I was like 18.
It was just, yeah, for me, this was just like constantly on like TBS and TNT or WGN. Yeah. So it's always been kind of a movie in the background for me. So I've had like more of an appreciation watching it this time, because I always just shrug this off as just like a jingoistic American nonsense war movie.
Yeah.
And it's not that. It's actually more of an anti-war movie than you think it is, because a lot of the fantasy is built around like American military jingoism, and then people use the imagery for that from this movie, but that's not what this movie is about.
Yeah. Well, this is one of those movies that was because who wrote the script? Is it Kevin Anderson?
John Milius. Kevin Reynolds wrote the original script called
Kevin Reynolds. Yeah.
It was like 10 Soldiers was the original one, and then Milius kind of rewrote it quite a bit. Because like I guess Reynolds' version of the story is more like, yeah, it's Soviets invade and kids have to fight off the Soviets, but his version was more about like Lord of the Flies, where they all descend into madness and like kind of fall apart. And then Milius's was slightly different. Milius is actually more based on his own childhood, because that's why it takes place in Colorado. Because Milius, like, he was like the youngest of like 5 children, and like when he was born, his dad was 58.
Oh wow, okay.
So he had like an old dad, and like they stopped like caring about like how to raise their kids. So he was a real wild child and did a lot of rebellious surfing. Like he was a big surfer, but also like I guess in the days he was a surfer, that was like being in a biker gang essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, 50s surfer is a lot different from 60s and 70s surfers. More of a punk ethos, I gather.
And so they sent him to a boarding school in Colorado because he was, they just got tired of dealing with him. And at that boarding school in Colorado, one of the things you could do is you could wake up early in the morning, just before dawn, go to the school, check out a rifle and a horse, and go out into the mountains and go hunting, and then come back before school started.
That's actually not a bad idea. I mean, maybe if they did that, things would be better.
Well, no, yeah. That's something you could do in Colorado. So
just doing that like New York City, riding around with a horse and rifle.
I mean, there used to be like gun clubs at schools in the early days.
I shot guns at school when I was in school, and I'm not that old.
And they did transition to like, let's not have guns in school, and then they kind of transitioned to like archery and stuff. And now even that's gone, as far as I know. I mean, it's probably at some rich schools, prep schools or whatever. But
no, well, I shot 22 rifles at school. Was like when we lived in like Arkansas and Georgia, like that. I think it's probably still going on down there. But yeah, you're not doing that in like anywhere where we live, or especially on the coasts.
Yeah,
maybe South Carolina. I don't know. They're kind of different. But
so yeah, like a lot of this, like a lot of this movie is kind of based on his kind of growing up in high school at a boarding school, and kind of that was like how this movie is kind of born out of from the Kevin Reynolds script of Tin Soldiers. So
Yeah.
Yeah, directed by John Milius, who's one of Hollywood's wild men. He's kind
Every
of
movie he's been involved with, I've generally liked.
yeah.
Whether he wrote the script or he directed it or did something, I was like, I like his stuff.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of. I mean, his persona is he's a right wing nutbag, which isn't untrue. He loves guns and he's in the NRA and loves all that stuff. But like, I don't know, like the person, because like the people he grew up with and went to school with, because he's a part of what they called the USC Mafia, because it was him, Lucas, Spielberg, Coppola, Zemeckis, and even I don't know. I don't think. He had to been NYU. Where did Scorsese go? I don't know. I watched the movie where like Scorsese knew him too, but I think Scorsese was just around them, but I don't think he was a part of the USC Mafia, or as they called it at one point. Anyway, so like his direct classmate was George Lucas. He was in class with George Lucas, and then like Spielberg and Zemeckis, they were around, and Coppola, they were around too. And so like, all those guys are pretty like heavy lefties and stuff like that. And so when they talk about John Milius, like they're like, he's a great friend, but his persona and his political persona is very grating and forced.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know, like George Lucas has like a great story where apparently when he was shooting like kind of the prototype to THX 1138 in college, like he went out and got it done and finished it before everybody else finished their project. And so I guess the teacher said that he couldn't screen it because it would embarrass everybody else because they didn't have their project done. And so John Milius went up and punched the teacher, like in defense of George Lucas. And George Lucas said, like, yeah, that's a story that's told all the time, and some people think it's not real. But being that I was an eyewitness, I will tell you that's true.
Yeah.
They also said that, like, that, even though like all these great filmmakers came out of that era, they say like film school at that time wasn't like idealized, and even they were like outcast at USC for the film school they were in.
Yeah.
And there was only like 8 people in the class and stuff like that. Because they said there's 3 film schools: UCLA, USC, and NYU, and that was all there was at the time.
Yeah, you didn't have like every state university now has a film program.
Yeah.
No, it was not. Because what kind of work could you could work in the Hollywood system or make commercials? There was like limited call for that.
Yeah, I mean, you could do. Yeah, it's like commercials, live broadcast for news, TV, and movies. So, which I mean, that's a lot, but still, it all gets focused down into a very small amount of people. They only trust so many people to do the job. There's enough work for everyone to go around, but money people only trust success, recent success. So, only few people get to actually do it. So,
yeah, when you get well, and also like director driven, writer driven stuff like didn't exist, and that's a product of like the last 15-20 years. Like before that, nobody cared. There was a few guys. It's like, oh, John Ford's making a film, but really it was all the actors that's what drew everyone.
Well, I think here they talk about like how these USC guys came up and started making blockbuster movies like like Jaws and stuff, is because at the time a lot of the old guys that owned these Hollywood studios, the people that were in the film business and started it because of their love for film and not a business, they were starting to retire, and then all these film companies got sold off to conglomerates or whatever, and they didn't know what to do with movies, so the movies started to really suck, and then like nobody went to the movies anymore until like Spielberg and stuff started making blockbusters, and that's what brought everybody back to the movies. And so even though like these guys like, look at these obvious geniuses, they had to like claw and tear to get all their movies made and make millions of dollars for these stupid people.
Yeah, fought them every inch of the way.
Yeah. And so it's a very close knit group where like they just ended up working together on everything, even though they are not credited for it. John Milius says, a slew of things that are not credited to him that he is like, famous for. Like he wrote the Indianapolis speech in Jaws.
Okay.
And
which is they had black eyes like doll's eyes.
Yep.
That was John Milius. Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
it's one of the most famous speeches in movies. That was John Milius.
Okay.
Also, yeah, another thing with John Milius is like he had asthma, so he wanted to be in the military, but he wasn't allowed to because of asthma. So it kind of is very similar to like we were talking about with Tom Clancy last week.
Oh yeah. John Milius also did script work on The Hunt for Red October.
Yeah, but not much.
Not much. Well, not enough that he got credited, but it was acknowledged that he did.
So he worked. So I forget the producer. Like Sean Connery was basically looking to get off the movie because he didn't like what he was getting. He didn't like the script. I want big speeches. Like I'm a big part of this movie. And so they allowed John Milius to come in and write a speech for Sean Connery. But the way he describes it is McTiernan only let him write the Russian parts when it was in Russian.
Okay.
And so basically he didn't write anything for the movie.
Yeah, you're going to write all the subtitled stuff.
Yeah. I mean, that's what he says. So I don't know. Cause like if you, cause we talked about last week is like they had to cut all the Russian stuff because they didn't trust his Russian accent. So basically it's like John Milius wrote like 3 sentences for the movie. And then this documentary I watched, they showed that speech where it's like, we're going to fight our enemies one more time, the American Navy. And so that's what they showed in the movie as like, that's the part he wrote the big speech for Sean Connery, but like, that's not Russian. So he wouldn't have wrote that. So I have no idea. So that's also Hollywood. So conflicting stories for drama, it's what they do. So, but let's see here. He wrote the the famous Dirty Harry speech, like did you find the stuff about the 44 Magnum, most powerful handgun in the world? Do you feel lucky, punk? All that stuff was John Milius. He wrote Apocalypse Now. The famous line for I love the smell of napalm in the morning and that stuff. He directed Conan the Barbarian and wrote that, like co-wrote that. Well, not co-wrote it. Him and Oliver Stone wrote a version of it. Which in the interview I saw with they're interviewing Oliver Stone, like their relationship is quite interesting because Milius is like, oh shit, like he hated Oliver Stone for being like this peace-loving lefty, but he also like, oh shit, that guy went to Vietnam and I didn't. Yeah. So he loved to hear war stories from Oliver Stone, but hated his politics. And so they didn't hate each other. They're just kind of like, well, our political ideals don't coalesce, but we love being around each other. So yeah, what else? But yeah, like John Milius has written some of the most famous things in Hollywood, and you probably know one of them. He's just probably not credited for. But yeah, because like the USC guys, they would all work together on stuff. So that's why he wrote that for Spielberg and was uncredited for it, because like he just like Spielberg's like, I need this thing, and like you're a good writer, and so he wrote that basically like over the phone. And then I don't know. There's like many different stories about that. The way Spielberg tells it is that he sent him a 10-page script for just that Indianapolis speech, and then they said the actor cut it down to about 5 pages. He just cut out a bunch of it. He didn't necessarily change anything. He just cut it down to smaller. And then also Milius said like when they were filming that scene that guy was drunk, and he had like screwed the nanny, and he was like going off and like weird asides. He's like, no, you gotta stay on script. Wow. Originally Lucas was going to direct Apocalypse Now.
I remember hearing about that.
But he was going to make it more documentary style and way low budget. But Coppola came on board and he made it to basically like a giant epic, that took forever. And like they're all talking about like, when Coppola dies making this movie, Lucas, you got to take over. And Lucas, when you die, then then it's Milius's turn to finish the movie. So we all got to come together to finish this movie.
Yeah. Yeah, this movie's gonna kill everyone that tries to make it, but we're
And again, like, you know, Milius, who's seen as this right wing nutbag, wrote Apocalypse Now, and he does delve into, like, you know, the cinema of warfare, which is very awesome to see, but it is an anti-war movie. Let's see here. Yeah, directed by John Milius. Cinematographer is Rick Waite, which I forget what he's done before. Let's look it up real quick. Oh, he did like 48 Hours, Cobra. Kind of,
Okay.
you know, some 80s action movie stuff. I don't know. The cinematography in this movie is good. I wouldn't necessarily, you know, but it doesn't necessarily stand out necessarily more than the concept of the movie. Written by Kevin Reynolds, who's got a story by and a screenplay credit, and then John Milius also, like, he basically did a draft of it where he changed a lot, so he gets credit for that too. Cast is Patrick Swayze, C. Thomas Howell, Leah Thompson, which probably aren't the most famous people, but we'll get to all the people there in the cast.
yeah, got a crazy cast.
It's yeah, it's one that's definitely like, oh, it's like this and The Outsiders, where it was just like, you know, well, I mean, that's what they called like the Brat Pack later on, where it was just all these people that ended up in like every famous 80s movie from then on. But even though this is like the mid 80s, but I guess also this is the first released PG-13 movie.
Right.
Because it was at, because I always get the trivia wrong. I always think it's like Temple of Doom was the first PG-13 movie, but it was that and Gremlins made the MPAA. It's like, oh, we need another rating because both these films are too violent for PG, but not violent enough for R. So, and then they created the PG-13 rating. And I guess technically a movie called Flamingo Kid got rated PG-13 first, but it wasn't released. It was like held back for like 5 months or whatever. And so this was the first released PG-13 movie.
Oh, okay. So that's what that. Okay.
Yeah. You know, with all trivia, there's heavy modifiers to make the trivia worthwhile, I guess. So we got Act 1, we got titles, and this is probably the first time I ever watched this movie that I remembered that there were titles that explained everything up front, because for some reason I don't remember this at all. Get Soviet Union suffers the worst wheat harvest in 55 years, labor and food riots in Poland. Soviet troops invade Cuba, Nicaragua, Cuba and Nicaragua reach troop strength goals of 500,000. El Salvador and Honduras fall. Greens Party gains control of West German parliament. Demands withdrawal of nuclear weapons from European soil. Mexico plunged into revolution. NATO dissolves. The United States stands alone.
This was all real stuff too. This was you know what? Remember all the satanic evil in Charlie Wilson's War about what we were doing in Central and South America?
Yeah.
And how Rakatos was always like, you guys are going to fucking prison. Like, whatever you're doing, this is going to end with you in jail. It's like the real fight is in Afghanistan, and no one wanted to listen to him because all the Central European or Central American and South American stuff was sexy, because it's like that's what the Russians are going to do. And then and actually the wheat harvest did fail in 1978 in Ukraine. That's why it was always this Cold War with America and the Soviet Union throughout the 80s was so weird. It's like, yeah, they buy a bunch of their food from us, like so they're going to go to war with us and starve. And this was kind of like I don't know when, I think Red Storm Rising came out around this time too. Now that was about their oil fields being sabotaged, but it was the same thing. It was like the Soviet Union, the non-nuclear World War III was always contingent upon like something's going to put the Soviets back to the wall.
Yeah.
And the Greens and the Liberals did want nuclear weapons out of Europe in the 80s. That was a real thing. They didn't get it, but and remember in the TV show The Americans, where they thought that we were developing something to make their crops fail.
Yeah.
And we went and sent those two into this lab, and they actually figured out, no, we were trying to stop crop failure, but the Soviets were so paranoid. They're like, no, the Americans are going to just kill all the crops so we starve. And it's like, yeah, that would kill their crops too, but okay, yeah. But yeah,
Well,
this was always a scenario.
well, that was interesting because, like, this scene is like a ridiculous movie, and even John Milius is like, yeah, this concept's ridiculous. So he tried his best to create a scenario where these things happen. And even though this is like a conventional war, like they say later on, like, oh, nukes were used, but
Yeah.
everyone stopped using them. We just never see nukes in the movie. So
Yeah, they didn't have the budget for it, and it's also that's like an end game thing. Like when you roll that out in a movie, that always means like, well, that's the last act, and then the next is people being very cold and dying of horrible like radioactive based diseases. So,
well,
yeah,
that's and I don't know, maybe this was a Clancy thing too, but he said like the idea at the time was like a limited nuclear warfare where it's like, oh, we can get away with just 3 nukes and then everybody stops. And so that's so that conversation that was going on with like, West Point people that he had like, he could get their ear. He's also like a friends with Alexander Haig and stuff like that.
yes.
So he was getting like that kind of stuff to put in a movie. So he was like rolling with those ideas. So
I mean, the only thing they didn't put in the title explainer credits, like the scroll of things that was almost as much as like a Star Wars opening, was that, oh, and we have a limp-wristed Democrat as our president. They didn't put that in, but you could tell they wanted to.
yeah.
It's like, it's like, well, this is why we get invaded by, because the whole concept of invading America and people being afraid of it is like, oh, that's psychotic. Like you could never invade America unless everyone in the country was dead, and even then it would be very difficult to get that many troops over here, even to occupy a country full of corpses. So like the thing in this movie is like, yeah, it's crazy, but you got to go with the what if, because doesn't make sense otherwise. Because I know a lot of people crap on this movie just because of that alone. It's like, well, America can never be invaded. It can't be invaded now, let alone 40 years ago with that level of technology. It's like, no, it can. But what if it was?
But that's people that are engaged in like kind of like war game stuff and like what's possible. Well, other people are just they don't engage in that stuff. They're just enraptured by fear, and so this will catch their attention too. It's like, oh my god, what happens when the Soviets invade? It's like, well, it's not going to happen. But okay, here you go.
Well, remember I told you about those people they were interviewing in the 90s about when Iraq invaded Kuwait, and it's like and the news said it's like the 4th most powerful army in the world has invaded its neighbors, and there are people in America like, when are they going to invade here? Like the Iraqi army staged some kind of D-Day off the coast of California. And people were like, yeah, when it comes, we're ready for him. It's like, I bet you are. I'm sure we're safe that Billy Bob is ready to the Iraqi Navy and their proven siege force. The Iraqi littoral assault ships that will be pulling into, wherever.
So we get those titles, then we cut to just shots flying through clouds.
Yeah.
Which, I guess if you've never seen this movie, that would not make sense at all until later. I mean, I guess I'm like almost 2 minutes later, but it's like, why are we in the clouds? Is this Superman? What's going on?
Just a guy flying in an American flag. It's like Homeland, just the American flag suit.
But I think it's supposed to the danger is coming from the sky, so we're showing the sky.
Watch the skies.
Was that an X-Files catchphrase, or
that's ufology 101.
Oh, okay.
Watch the skies, they're coming. I've heard that in a lot of things. So yeah, it was probably said in the X-Files a lot.
We get a title that just says September. Then we get a shots of like an empty and serene American town, which is just kind of weird. It's like, did an apocalypse already happen? Has the war started? It's like, nope, this is an America in the 80s.
Yeah.
It kind of looks really bad.
This is that thing that everyone wants to fight to the death over. A bunch of dumpy gray buildings.
We get
Has Colorado already been balkanized by the Soviets? Why does it look this way? Oh no, that's just how they do things.
We get a shot of a Teddy Roosevelt statue. It says the Rough Rider. Far better it is to dare mighty things than to take rank with those poor, timid spirits who know neither victory nor defeat. John Milius is a big fan of Teddy Roosevelt, so just throw this in here. He did later on go on to direct a movie called Rough Riders, which is about that. So I've never seen it, so I don't know. Because this gets a lot of slack for being a jingoistic right-wing propaganda movie when it's, if you actually analyze it, it isn't. So I don't know if Rough Riders is that or not.
Yeah, well, there's been a lot of revisionism around Theodore Roosevelt too. You don't know what to believe.
Yeah. We get Patrick Swayze. He plays Jed.
Yep.
Like everyone has a last name, but in the credits, everyone just has one name, including the Air Force colonel, who's just Andy. So that's kind of weird. So I just go by the credits that were on Internet Movie Database. So he drops his brother off. I wrote or something. I don't know. He drops off. I think it's Aardvark and Matt. I don't know why Aardvark's with them, but he's just there. I guess they're in the same class and probably lives next door or something like that. Yeah, this just shows that, like, oh, this is the older brother who's out of high school, and this is the brother that's in high school. And Matt's played by Charlie Sheen. I'm not sure how early this was in his career, but it's pretty
This movie
early.
has said it basically launched the careers of Patrick Swayze and Charlie Sheen. Like, they had both been in other things, but this was like, oh, people noticed them.
Yeah. Then we cut to Frank McRae, who we last saw in Last Action Hero.
This also has an iconic movie vehicle. The late 70s Chevy K10 step-side pickup.
Oh, it's a K10? Okay, I wrote my notes S10, just, offhand. So, okay.
No, it's a K. It's a full size. It's a K series. But it was I forget what kind of engine it had, but it was a 4-wheel drive pickup, and it was one of those things. It was like it was a very iconic movie. It was in a lot of movies in the 80s. That was always a lot of good guys drove those trucks, and they're fairly expensive at the time too.
Is
because
that
anything that had like a step side bed or any customized stuff like that, it was like way more complicated to do that back then.
Well, is step side purely aesthetic, or does it have like a purpose use other than getting in the back from the side?
You'd think with my background I would know the answer to that, but I think it's purely aesthetic. I think it's just because it does make the box. I'm sorry, the what everyone else calls the bed of the truck. It does make it narrower, so its cargo hauling space is limited by that step side. But so I think it's more.
But you don't got that hump, so everything can go.
That's right. Yeah, there is no hump. It's a straight bed inside, straight box. Now they have the hump, but they synthesize the hump. Like it's like an applique that goes. They have holes in the fender, and you put this thing on, so it looks like a hump.
Huh.
They haven't made hump side bed. Oh, you can't with aluminum. I don't think you could. It's a lot harder to make those shapes with aluminum. But yeah, these were cool trucks. Now they all rusted out before the 80s were over, but I remember people had them. It's like, those are neat and they're easy to work on because they literally, the engines in those, they made like 10 million of them. So it's like, yeah, you can find spare parts for this anywhere.
Yeah, and the great thing about working at trucks, you don't need to raise it up to work on it.
No. Matter of fact, sometimes you need a ladder to work on the engine. But once you strip all that government pollution crap out of them, you can stand right in the engine box and work on things. I know, I've done it. It's like you'd never. It's like that time change of spark plugs. You just kind of appear from underneath. You can only do that in like Chevy trucks. Even the Ford trucks, the way the firewall was designed, you couldn't fit in there. But
well, I know that. Well, the thing that there's like a trivia. but it's always like BMWs are overly complicated and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest kind of push that BMW ever made in America was the BMW E36.
Okay.
And so surprisingly, it's a practically designed vehicle that you can actually work on. So much so that changing the oil in it, the oil filter, you can change from opening the hood. It's just like you just take it out and put it in. It's like, oh wow, like a German car where you don't have to do 4,000 things and buy a $8,000 tool to change the oil. That's fascinating.
Yeah, you have to take the engine off the motor mount, the oil. It's like, that's nice. Yeah, big trucks spoiled me. Even my Ranger pickup that I had in high school, that really spoiled me for later in life. Because it's like, oh, time to change the oil. It's like you just slid on the ground and got underneath there. And not now. Now there's like sound absorbing plates. And now, of course, in my cars that I drive now, you don't have to yell to have a conversation inside. I'm like, that's nice. But, you also, it's like, how much to change the oil? Oh, $200. It's like, oh, wait a minute. We're not changing the oil on a Bugatti. We're changing the oil on a Fusion. It's like, no, they got to pull that sound deadening plate and shit out. It's like, oh, they took all the bad ideas from Jaguar when they bought them, and now they it up. It's like, it's a very quiet ride in the car, but wow, sound deadening plate, really dumb.
Yeah, well, we make the bottom of your car also aerodynamic. It makes sure you have to take off all the aerodynamic stuff. Yeah, my car. Lucky with my car, it sits like for a car, it has really high clearance.
Yeah.
And so just enough that I can get under there and change the oil without having to put it on. I don't have to lift it up at all. So,
yeah,
but I can barely fit it in either. So, but just enough. Yeah. So get Franklin McRae, plays Mr. Teasdale. We last saw him in Last Action Hero. He was like the angry, like captain or chief of police or whatever. What do you call that? Like captain of detectives or whatever.
Yeah, chief detective.
Angry lieutenant or whatever. He's teaching history about the Mongols and their tactics of like encircling their foes and killing every living thing within that circle.
Now, if I had history teachers like that in high school, I would have been in rapture. More. They wouldn't have had to like hit me in the back of the head and make me pay attention or whatever. They would have had my undivided attention.
And saying that like, yeah, well, he's also saying like, when he gets to the end, like they let one living thing, be it a person or a butterfly, live to tell the story.
Yep. Just like Mickey and Mallory Knox.
And then we get Soviet paratroopers start landing outside the school. Mr. Teasdale goes out there, is like, hey, thinking it's just like some National Guard drill that's gone wrong or something like that.
With all the stuff going on in the world in the opening credits, this guy's still like blindly walking outside. Like, hey, why are you guys setting up a machine gun next? How come no one's talking English? What's going on here? Question. And why would they shoot up a school? Like now you could this scene. It's like,
you
wouldn't put this in a movie nowadays because it's like too close to what's really going on.
Yeah, because the Russians Soviets start indiscriminately killing everybody in the school who isn't armed.
Yeah, no one in the school is armed. That's the big difference between then and now. Nowadays, if they'd done that, people would be busting out the windows and firing back. It's a whole different story.
Well, no, they'd just be cowardly shot with their guns in their hands.
I'd like to believe they'd shoot back because they know they're going to die anyway because these guys have machine guns. It's like, yeah, just fire at them. You're not going to live through it, but, die with your boots on, as they say.
They fire a rocket launcher down the hallway. It's like, why?
Yeah.
Again, this is.
I've always wanted to do this. Yeah. Ivan, come here. Watch this. It's going to go right through the school.
I mean, the brilliant thing about this movie and why it gets this rap of being just like right-wing propaganda is because this is like a teenage fantasy. This is like,
yeah.
Because you're like, okay, what if something happens and like a child, have to like do adult things to save the world? Like, so we're going to create that scenario. That's what's going on here. So it's like, why are all this stuff? I mean, yeah, it doesn't make sense that all this stuff is getting shot up and blown up. But for the scenario for that to happen, Like that's what needs to happen.
I guess I never thought of it that way. I always thought of like they were doing this to like, oh, the main characters are going to be doing really awful stuff later in the movie. This is going to justify
Yeah.
whatever it is they're doing, because whenever I see like the extreme like murder violence against obviously unarmed innocent civilians, it's like, oh, our main characters are going to be doing some awful things. We want to give the audience a reason to cheer for them.
But also you gotta show like the audience the horrors of war. It's like here's all your children getting shot up in a school and blown up. Because like it doesn't make sense later on where it's just like the city's now like taken over and people have capitulated to the Soviets, and it's like, why would they do that after they've just indiscriminately killed children?
Yeah, it's like, yeah, we can obviously ally with these people. They wouldn't do awful things, would they? Right? Yeah, I always I mock like the Darth Vader bad guys, and it's not that Darth Vader's a bad guy, but remember when he was strangling all the admirals in like the Empire?
Yeah,
and it's like, yeah, no one's gonna like go through more than one of those where they're not like, hey, we need to. Okay, I know we all hate each other and we're working against each other. We need to team up and shoot this guy out of an airlock now because number one, obviously our weapons and tactics suck because we can't catch a freighter. And number two, this guy's just going to kill his way through the ranks until no one's left. So do you want to be next, Bill? You, Bob? No, let's shoot this guy out of an airlock or shoot him in the chest and turn off his breathing machine because, we're going to. So I always love the Darth Vader, like, I'm killing all my subordinates that fail me because everyone's going to be that much more motivated. Like, yeah, right. The only guy who ever got away with that was Stalin, but that's because he did it through cutouts. It's like Stalin didn't do it. Beria did it. Not Papa Joe. So, anyway, back to the movie.
I was also like, that's how, we only have 2 hours to tell a movie, so that's you have to do that thing really quickly.
That's book brain in me that comes out. Like, you would never do this. Everyone would hate you.
Yeah,
you murder their children. You destroy their future. They're never going to be on your side.
Yeah, but you have to have it like you have to have that turn later on where everybody starts turning, and it's the it's like the glorious like, yeah, we made a comeback. Although in this movie that really doesn't happen.
No, that's what I like. That's one thing I appreciate about this movie. It's just dark. At the end of the day, it is bleak.
Matt and
absolute sense. It's like, yes, it would be.
Matt and Aardvark are trying to like take a car, but it just gets shot up and the engine blows up, so they're fine, but the car blows up. Well, not fiery blows up. It just explodes in a burst of air and gunfire. So
yeah. Even though all you would do is break the engine block and it just wouldn't start, and the radiator would leak everywhere.
But also they didn't have a car, so we don't even know if like there were keys in the car. Like I doubt it, but maybe they knew how to hotwire a car. I don't know. But anyways, Jed shows up.
This when you shoot a running engine with gunfire. First of all, it's a lot harder to stop a car with gunfire unless you're using like armor piercing stuff. Because most engine blocks are, especially in cars of this era, they're pretty thick chunks of like high nickel steel and thick cast iron and stuff, or not cast iron, like. They're good tough alloys. The worst damage you could do is break the radiator and the car would overheat about 5 miles down the road. Like it would keep going.
Yeah.
Even if you punched a hole in like the oil pan, it was like, the engine would run until the oil ran out of it. Now, modern cars, I don't know, because they're mostly plastic and stuff. So yeah, they might just stop
and have a bunch of safety sensors that might stop it. So
yeah, and stupid shit like that.
So Jed shows up back with the truck with the Chevy K10, and he grabs Matt and Aardvark and a bunch of more kids. They avoid an RPG, but it hits a school bus and blows it up. So I'm pretty sure kids cheer to that in the theaters. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Everyone got the wrong message from this movie.
Oh yeah.
They totally missed it.
Then we cut to a bumper sticker that says they can have my gun when they pry it from my gold dead hands.
I didn't know this saying was this old. When I read that, I was like, wait a minute. I thought that was something from the 90s.
And then that exactly happens. The guy's kind of crawling with his Colt 45 and they pry it from his hand. So it's very funny because he's
And thus
basically
Charlton Heston was born.
well, it's Milius essentially making fun of the NRA's own bullshit.
Yeah.
Which he's a part of. So yeah, it's kind of funny.
Hey, the NRA is I'm ambivalent towards the NRA too. I don't so I understand it's like, yeah, they're very mockable, but they're also like, well, this is the only group that's like on your side if you're a gun owner, so it's kind of a weird thing to be a part of. But
well, they got more groups now, but then that was like the only one. So
yeah.
So Jed and his Chevy K10 cruise down Main Street. Aardvark's father calls for him, like as he's being taken hostage, and he was speaking Spanish, which I never knew. Like, oh, Aardvark's like, I didn't know he was like, I don't know, presumably Mexican or something. I don't know. That'd be the closest, Spanish speaking country, but
Yeah.
But I also hear like the soldiers speaking Spanish because they're Cuban. So, well, there's a mix, which I didn't necessarily pick out, but yeah, it's like a mix of Soviet and, well, I guess they're all Soviets, a mix of Russian and Cuban soldiers here, but it's supposed to be mostly Cuban because they're the closest that could launch the assault or whatever. So,
those Cuban soldiers.
Oh, the irony. Yeah, because that's okay. I have to ask, did any of the like scenes with the Soviets have subtitles?
Yeah, some of them did.
Okay, when I watched it, none of the scenes had, so you just had to guess what was going on.
If you turn the subtitles on for all the dialogue, all the Spanish and Russian will have no subtitles. But if you turn just the general subtitles off, the ones that are generated in the movie, they will be there.
Oh, okay. So
I was watching it too, and it's like it was having these long sections of, and a lot of it wasn't Russian exactly. It was kind of that Russian gibberish they spoke back then. Because like I was like, wait a minute, the red potato is what? What's this guy saying? And then it becomes like, oh, okay, they're doing that kind of Russian gibberish stuff. But it was like there's no subtitle. This is like long sections of dialogue, and these guys aren't acting in a way where it's like they're communicating meaning but speaking in Russian like it's clever. This isn't that kind of movie. So it's like, oh wait, turn the general subtitles off for all the language, and then you'll get the subtitles.
Oh, okay.
Russian for the Russian and Spanish in English.
Okay, so I didn't know if they were doing some weird artistic choice where it's like an alien. Like you don't get the plot; it's just all alien. You have to pick up all on body language and stuff like that.
Yeah, so that's what I was thinking too. I was like, wait a minute, this is Red Dawn. This is like some Janus art house film from Europe.
All right, well, I guess I missed all the subtitles and I've just had context clues of what's going on with them. But
none of it was like it was like interesting because I went back after I realized what was going on and turned the subtitles off where I could see it. And it's like, it's just basically talking about what they do. So you're not missing a lot.
Well, the thing you're supposed to pick up on is like the thing with Colonel Bella is that like he was a revolutionary. And so like, this is anathema to what he's doing. He's like, basically it's like, I'm essentially fighting my own people in a different war.
Yeah.
Like I would be on the other side in a different war. Like I'd be with them. That's what I used to do. That's how I fought the invading army.
Yeah, it's like I'm against the well-funded huge force. We're the rebels in Star Wars.
They stop at a gas station outside of town, and the guy loads them up with supplies. Like, this is C. Thomas Howell here. He plays Robert, and that's his dad. And they grab like guns and coke and.
I love this gas station. It's like, yeah, get you some sleeping bags, and, and 4,000 rounds of ammunition, and get you some shotguns. Here's some rest. Like, what kind of gas station is this? Holy shit! Like, this is the Apocalypse Auto and Oil like gas station. Like, it's your one stop. Like, oh, you weren't prepping? Well, we got you covered here at the gas station.
Well, it's also
it was all shot to shit, and somehow they fixed the radiator on the fly. And then, because remember they were pissing in the radiator.
Oh, that's just next moment. That's the next moment.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I thought that was funny too. Is that like they grab all these supplies and it's like almost immediately in the next scene they've seemingly used all their supplies,
Yeah.
which would be reminiscent of them being teenagers and not knowing how to ration and think ahead of time. That would be a thing, but it's not really a problem here. It's just weird that like they basically like in a fantasy grabbed all the basic things they would need and then immediately like lose them, even though they don't show them losing them other than like because basically in the next scene they're like driving down like some back road and like in the country, and they're like they have these fences up where there's farms and there's a blockade ready for them, and they start shooting at. There's like an APC there, and then they cut off into the farm. That's where that's where their car gets shot up and the radiator gets hit. But they do see a U.S. Army helicopter come in and like provide, fire. So it shoots up the convoy and then like takes off. Which this is presumably the National Guard doing this.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
So yeah, the Chevy's busted, so they piss in it because they're out of water. And somebody just makes a suggestion. Matt makes a suggestion, and then they make like the kid that's kind of bitching about everything. He's like, "Get up there, piss in the radiator." It's like, all right. And it seems to be fine. Although I don't think after this, I don't think they ever use the truck ever again. Do they?
No, I don't remember seeing it.
Okay. Then we cut to the city at night. It's being blown up with fighting between the Soviets and presumably one of the lone U.S. helicopter, because they only have one helicopter flying around.
Yeah, it's just helicopters just like really putting it to them. And I don't know how it's like not being because they show them firing like missiles at it, and it's like doesn't seem to knock it down. It's a very destructive helicopter. It's like buildings are exploding, rockets are flying out of it, and there's a guy hanging out the door with a gun. It's like, hell of a helicopter, man. It's really doing its bit.
A Cuban Soviet colonel is assessing the situation and directing Cubans and the Russians. All those scenes, I don't know what they say, so I don't know if there's anything more that you've had for that scene, other than they're just like, hey, we need to get that chopper down or something.
Yeah.
So I have that being the end of Act 1, because it's like, well, the Soviets invaded. We got to stop it. That's your plot point.
Yep.
So we have Act 2. We got Jed and his gang of high school kids are hiding out in the woods, which I think almost everybody. Yeah, everyone was really young, but like Patrick Swayze was older than I think everybody, because he was like 28 when this movie was filming, so he would have been older than everybody. But that's what his character's supposed to be. But I think his character's supposed to be like 21 though. But Swayze can play younger because he's in really good shape. So. Because he was like a dancer and some shit, so he was always in good shape. Some of the kids like vote to turn themselves in because like one of them is like the class president, so of course you just got to throw them in there to be, fucking dweebs.
Yeah, the guy who's like into like democracy and like part of the political system is like, I vote to surrender. It's like everyone's like, you must be a Democrat. I mean, they don't actually explicitly state this stuff, and this movie kind of gets dragged through the mud as being like, a reactionary fantasy of the '80s, and some of it is, but it's also a lot of it is like, it's a lot more weirdly subtle than that.
Yeah,
if you just actually watch the movie, it's like, it's a combination of a lot of dumb and smart stuff from the '80s.
Yeah.
So, but some of the stuff that people come up with in this is like great.
Well, again, like when you get served this in this movie, when you get served this eye-rolling, right-wing propaganda, you have to wait till the end of the movie to realize, see, it wasn't worth it.
Yeah.
So yeah, Jed invites them to like leave, but they like coward out in both ways. It's like, well, they're too much of a coward to turn themselves in. They're also too much coward to like say no to Jed. So they're just completely they're frozen by decision.
Yeah, there's like two bad choices, like be cold and hungry in the woods and possibly be killed, or go into the waiting arms of you don't know, death, enslavement.
Here Jed says that him and Matt have been hunting in the mountains with their father for a long time, and so they can live out here for a long time. They're like, they say, hey, we can hunt and fish. Although that's weird because later on it seems the thing is, would be true, is that they're constantly just running out of food.
Yeah.
Which can be when you're starving, it's a very motivating thing to do, like, sell out your friends and stuff like that if people are promising food to you or whatever. So but we cut to, they're out there hunting. Here he says, like, you don't shoot twice, so they know where you are. This is Robert's first hunting kill, and so they make him drink the deer's blood.
Yeah.
I like Matt says, it's kind of like eating steak with a nosebleed. So, there's also like,
what about diseases? We're gonna eat this thing later. It's like, yeah, we're gonna cook it first, right?
There's also a lot of like, they're using a lot of like Native American mysticism here as like, a part of American culture, and it's like, but like it's used like they don't sense the irony of that.
No.
Because also like the like,
yeah, it's like, hey, the Native Americans did this and that. Maybe we should do this. It's like, dude, hold on, wait a minute. Think about where you are and why you're here right now. You want to follow their tactics?
Well, also like the tagline for the movie is like, America's never been invaded before, and it's like, well, it depends on your perspective.
Yeah. It depends on like what you consider American. It's like the United States of America. Yeah, right. It has it. Continentally as a landmass? Oh, yes. Many times.
And they're back at camp, and they say they need more food, which again, this is weird. It's like, wait, you just like raided this gas station. You now have a whole deer to eat, and you're out of food
you
still.
Killed an elk or something. Like, thing weighs as much as your truck did. Like, it should be. I mean, yeah, don't eat the asshole. I get that, but you gotta have something. And beef jerky stays forever. So,
but again, this could be a thing like where, like, I don't know, they don't say like any of the kids are vegetarian, although that would have been a thing you could have played here. It's like, oh, it's liberals not eating meat because of their morals. Like, you idiot, we need to survive. There's
there's no vegetarians in a famine. I'll tell you that.
Because it may seem like, they don't want to eat the canned food and they don't want to eat the deer meat, so that's why we're out of food. It's like, no, you're not out of food. You just are out of food you want to eat.
Yeah, I want mashed potatoes. Like, well, you want to catch a bullet too? Because I'm not willing to do that. So it looks like it's macaroni and cheese.
And with the Soviets here, we're never getting mashed potatoes ever again. It's vodkas forever, baby.
Yeah, they're not going to use those potatoes to make something, some high carb food for you to eat.
We cut to morning. They're heading back down into town to get like food, and they see a bunch of like broken down military equipment, which I think is supposed to be the U.S. Army being defeated here. I'm not sure.
Yeah. We want to talk about the military mock-ups in this movie yet, or
sure? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I watched a side documentary about the making, because this wasn't a huge budget movie, but it wasn't like a micro budget movie either.
Yeah, this is a mid-budget movie.
I think they did a pretty good job of what they were trying to. We'll just talk about the vehicles.
I'll make one kind of like reference here. They said this was a huge hit. They spent $17 million to make it. It only made $38 million at the box office, so that doesn't really scream huge hit to me. But It is twice the budget. And they also said that this movie saved MGM from bankruptcy. But the year before, they made War Games for $12 million. It made $79 million.
Yeah,
so
that's a hit.
That seems like fraud has occurred. Anyways, continue.
Someone's not reporting the number right. No, it's they used I gotta remember, this is like 1984, so production's 82, 83, and they had a lot of Soviet tanks in this movie. Well, of course you couldn't get Soviet tanks back then for any price. That came much later. But so what they did was they based everything around the American M103 chassis, which was like a generic tracked vehicle chassis. They did everything from tanks to self-propelled artillery on that. Well, they had a bunch of those, so they just made wood and fiberglass mock-ups of T-72 Soviet tanks. And in the movie, I mean, if you're like a weirdo model maker like me, it's like, well, I know that those tracks and wheel configurations aren't right, but the top of the tank looks like a T-72. And they
Yeah.
made that out of wood and fiberglass. And that's pretty damn cool for a movie of this era with this special effects budget. It's like, that is a convincing, like, Russian tank. And the guys were talking about how they had to repaint them constantly. And like all the fiberglass and wood was just shaking itself apart because it's not steel, but it has look like steel. And then I guess like FBI agents showed up at one of the special effects places because somebody called and said there were like these guys had Russian tanks out at their place, and they're like, no, these are wood mock-ups for a movie. Those are stories you hear. I don't know if they're true or not, but it's like like in the 80s, who was calling the FBI? Like, there's Russian tanks out here. And this movie was filmed, by the way, in like New Mexico, I think most of it. So it's like, yeah, who the hell's running around in the wilds of New Mexico? Like, I see a Soviet tank, but you never know. It sounds more like an anecdotal story that makes the movie seem cooler. But I think they did a good job mocking up these tanks.
Yeah.
And like I said, even a guy like me who like knows what these tanks actually look like from model building and stuff is like, yeah, that's convincing from a distance. I mean, that looks pretty cool.
I know like the Dashikas they made up, like they weren't actually those, but they kind of made them look as much like them as they could.
Yeah, they put the big squared off like hexagonal barrel mechanism, I'm gonna call it. I don't know what that does except keep the barrel down so it doesn't ride.
And then it was probably the first movie mock-up of a Hind D, which isn't very convincing, but at the time was probably okay for what they could do with a flying prop.
Well, yeah, they were like French Puma helicopters, and what they had to do was they had to put those wood, because the Hinds were just like the air tanks. So they had all these rocket pods and machine guns on these wings. They're a very scary weapon at the time. In Afghanistan, they were devastating until the Stinger missile got introduced. And then, like the Soviet soldiers said, their air support, they became cosmonauts because they were flying so high in the air they couldn't really effectively provide ground support. But yeah, Hinds were deadly. You didn't want to deal with them. But of course, you couldn't buy one for any price back then. So they had to stick wood mock-ups on these helicopters. They were Pumas, which was like a French consortium made those, and they were kind of like utility helicopters. And but I guess according to John Milius, like they got temporary FAA licenses to fly these things, and they said as long as you don't fly them over people or cities, because like we don't know once that prop starts spinning how this thing's going to fly with all that extra wood and stuff on it. Like they could just shake apart and pull it out in pieces. We don't, because I don't know if you've ever been near an actual helicopter that runs. I'm sure you have. Yeah. It's just a destructive event. It's like helicopters are wildly dangerous, destructive things. And if you're near one on the ground when it's taking off and you see all the trees lay down flat and your car starts shaking violently, you realize like, oh yeah, let's put wood on this thing and like paint it and see what happens. It's like, yeah, just don't fly it over a city, because that thing hits the ground, it's going to kill a lot of people. But they did look like scary Russian Hind helicopters for the time.
Yeah.
Considering you had to actually see, nowadays, like you would just CG all that crap.
Yeah.
But this was like actual, like, yeah, and it doesn't look bad. It looks like a big scary helicopter. It suspends my disbelief, even though I've built elaborate models of Hind helicopters, and I know they don't have square cockpits. They have kind of the round bulbousy ones, which were weird at the time, because those were reinforced with titanium so the pilots could see all around. Like that was considered a cool thing the Russians did. Now, what we did with the Apache was we just put a camera monocle over one guy's eye, and when he looked around, there was a camera that looked around. Way more efficient than the Russian eye, bulbous, but the Russians couldn't make a camera that worked right. And they definitely couldn't make it an eye thing that would go to the pilot. So, because the Soviet army sucked. That's the secret of the Cold War. Our enemies were terrible.
Yeah, so they head into town. They see like the Soviets are rolling in, and so they got just like a convoy of just like trucks moving in, APCs, tanks, cargo stuff. Jed, Matt, and Robert hide their guns and walk into town to like investigate. So this is like where it gets weird. It's like, why don't they just grab them immediately? So apparently, like the city is operating again, but under severe control. So
Yeah.
They see some people they know, but everyone's like very skittish and not talking to them. They talk to a girl named Alicia at the general store, and she tells them the KGB are looking for them and Jed. So this is where they learn that's
turn around.
yeah, there's some KGB guy up. Yeah, there's some agent like up in the upper deck or whatever that they see is like, oh, this is how they would learn that it's the Russians and the Cubans. So like, it's like, oh, that's what's going on.
Yeah, they're doing fact finding at this point because they have no idea. Like,
Yeah,
they really don't have any idea what's going on.
yeah.
How people came and shot up the school.
Yeah, because like I mean, like when you see trailers for this, like you know what's going on, so you know that's what. But you have to put yourself in their minds. It's like we have no idea. Like, yeah, maybe there's a red star and stuff, but we don't know exactly what that means.
Yeah.
So we cut to
The Ruskies are the Democrats from California who took over Colorado.
Is this Texas? Is that the Lone Star State? Is that why there's one red star on their vehicles?
Yeah, they kind of make people from Colorado seem like a bunch of hicks in this movie too, and it's like
I mean, hicks are everywhere, so you know it's not like a. But
yeah, I always think of Colorado as like rich ski people and lots of like dope.
Yeah,
that's what I think of now.
Yeah, they're like hippies that like guns, so
yeah. They're hippies that can like they know like they can field strip an AK-47, but they're still into like peace and love. But it's like
cool? They own a vegan bakery, but they also have a fully automatic AK-47.
They want a flamethrower. Everyone does. Oh yeah, there's I want to talk for a little bit about some supplemental material that could enhance your viewing of Red Dawn, because I'm going to start referencing this as we go into this visit to town more. The riff tracks, Red Dawn, is one of the funniest things you'll ever hear. Because I remember me and my son watched it when he was like 12 with the riff tracks playing, and I'm going to reference that quite a bit because it's like one of the best things riff tracks has done. Just because it's like the riff tracks for Red Dawn is almost like the first airplane movie. It's like, how are they generating jokes that way? It's like hilarious. There's almost no dead air in this. So check that out if you can find that. I don't know if there's riff tracks still, because I bought it.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, so just check that out.
And if not, it's an MP3, so
that's what I did. I bought
out
the
there
from riff tracks.
Well, no, I'm just saying it's easy data to transfer, so it's out there if you want it.
Yeah, get it. Find it. Get it in your skull, however you got to.
So we cut to the re-education camp. Jen and the gang are like going to see what they're doing to people they rounded up. So they go asking for their dads. So Harry Dean Stanton shows up. He's Jed and Matt's dad, Mr. Eckhart. He tells them to not say anything. And then he's like, I was hard on you for a reason. He also says, like, one way or another, we're all gone. They also, like, learn that their mom is probably dead. He just kind of, like, doesn't say about it. So, well, I guess we know what that means. He also tells them to stop crying. And
Don't cry. In this movie, everyone is admonished not to cry.
Yes. But they still all cry.
Yeah, oh yeah. I could never imagine being that person when somebody is like, because I've been around, and I believe me, I'm uncomfortable around people's emotions. I'm not saying like I share them, but I would never tell someone who like got bad news, hey, dude, don't cry. It's like, that is so weird.
But there's like, I mean, there's got to be like John Wayne movies or something where somebody said, don't cry, and then they didn't cry. And the whole point of that was like, see, now you're a man by the end of the movie. But that is not what happens here.
No. Save that and use it for murder. It's like, huh? Then more people will cry. Wait, what? The cycle of crying never ends. That's life. That's what the Buddha teaches us, damn it.
But it's almost like John Milius was unintentionally like making a point about toxic masculinity before that was like a phrase.
Oh, it's always been with us. We just didn't compartmentalize it.
Jad says, Dad, I love you. And he's like, I know you do, son. I love you too. And then as they're walking away, he just kind of spouts up with energy like, boys, avenge me. Avenge me.
Me and Grayson used to do that all the time. Watching that on riff tracks. Because he'd like go be driving. He's like, okay, I'm going to school now. This is when he starts driving. He'll be like, avenge me. That's how we sent him off to school, because that's what they said in riff track.
Then we cut to next morning. Jed, Matt, and Robert go to Mr. Mason's house. Who, I don't know how, he's just a guy they know. I don't know. I don't know what the relationship is to everybody.
It sounds like in this town everyone's kind of related. It's
Yeah.
one of those places.
Mr. Mason tells them about like the Free America Zone, which we never see it or know what it is. It's just mentioned. Yeah, well, other than they aren't in it.
What's in the Free America Zone? It's Ronald Reagan and a few dozen patriots taking back the country.
He gives them a radio that's hidden in a block of ice, which I'm just looking at that because he didn't like cover it in anything. It's like that radio is useless now.
Yeah, I saw that too, and I was like, "It's just like a Utah radio kind of technology we didn't know about now."
But you know, I know practically they had to do that so that people could see like, oh, he hid it in a block of ice. That's smart. But you also have to see what it is, that it's a radio. But when you see that it's a radio, it's like, it's not protected by anything.
I think it would have been cool if he just handed him a Stouffer's frozen lasagna. Like, here you go, take this. You didn't see what was in it. He's like, yeah, cool. No context was ever given. We'll be talking about it forever. What is the lasagna scene? Remember the lasagna scene from Red Dawn? But, you know. No one was doing this for humor.
Yeah.
The funnies.
Robert learns that his dad was shot and killed. He owned the gas station. He was killed for aiding the guerrillas, which is them.
Yeah.
Actually, not yet. So they aren't considered guerrillas yet. So he was also probably handing guns off to any American he knew or whatever.
Yeah, any freedom-loving American.
Mr. Mason has a couple of granddaughters he has hidden away. This is Jennifer Grey and Leah Thompson.
Yeah, it's weird. I forgot. Like, oh, they're both in this. Wow.
Yeah. Apparently, the Soviets tried to rape them. That's what's inferred. So they send the girls off with Jed and them, and they give them horses, ammo, and food.
Yeah.
Which again, they're just like running through this food, man.
Yeah, these guys are eating like it's like, you're gonna eat the horses too. Like, how much are you guys eating?
It's literally been 2 days. They ate a truck full of food, a deer.
Yeah. Just ate an elk. Yeah, this hiding in the woods shit. These guys are getting fat. We packed you some sadness bacon.
They're like
German.
Oh, it's just Schweinefleisch.
Grief bacon, yeah.
Cut to night. They're back at camp listening to the radio. So that's the radio they got in the block of ice. There's a bunch of code words, but also everything seems bleak and everyone's crying.
This is to all the freedom fighters out there. And it was always like, the chair is against the wall. The chair is against the wall. Like they're giving code, like World War II type stuff.
I forget. I think this might be where he's like, I'm not sure if this is the point. I think because everyone's crying, this is like, don't cry, turn it into something else. But that might be later on. I'm not sure. But that's a big thing about telling people not to cry and then going to cry. You cut to day. Daryl and Danny spot some Soviets on a truck. And then we cut to the Soviets. They're like sightseeing in the forest. One of the guys translates the sign for the group. And they're like, good job. I think it's one of the Cuban guys because he normally speaks Spanish, so he's translating into Russian for them. I think that's what was going on.
So he's trilingual. He's reading Russian, reading English, translating into Russian, but he's speaking Spanish also.
Yeah.
We would call that a genius in America. We'd be vaguely suspicious of that person. He speaks how many languages?
What side are you on?
Yeah, who are you aligned with? Who's got their arm around you?
They're taking photos with each other in the photos. You see the kids are like hiding among the rocks. Like it's a cool, like just like cut to the other side and you see it and it's like, what's going on?
Scene. It's like these guys are having fun and taking pictures because the one guy's like at least 1.5 feet taller than the other.
Yeah.
Guys. Like trying to look serious with their AKs, and then you like just cut, and these kids are like hiding on the rocks like this, trying not to move.
Because again, like having basically knowing this movie as a trailer and not over analyzing it, like I like always like, oh yeah, they're always guerrillas and freedom fighters, and then here they're not yet. They're just hiding. they're not trying.
Aggressive tourists.
But like they're not trying to kill the Soviets. They just don't want to be spotted by them.
Yeah. Because the Soviets will just like hose them down with bullets on sight.
Yeah.
Because you gotta have a bad guy.
So yeah, but yeah, like one of the guys spots like an arrow, and he's like, "What's going on here? It's plastic or whatever." And then like
because at first they say is this an Indian arrow or something?
Yeah.
If you can see the subtitles, they say.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, he was like, "Oh, is this like a native? Is this an Indian arrow?" It's like, "No, you idiot, it's plastic."
Yeah.
So then the end of one of the Soviets spot them, and so they start yelling at them as they're like trying to run away, and then they start shooting at them. Then one of the kids shoots one of the Soviets with an arrow, which like it's very like unceremonious because he's just like he's like trying to crawl away on his knees. It's like, oh yeah, this is embarrassing.
Yeah, well, he shoots him with a broadhead, which is like a razor blade exploding in your body. That guy wouldn't just be like, that guy would be in horrible pain if he didn't die immediately. His lungs would be filling with blood.
But it's just like here, it's just the way it's almost like comical, even though it's like, because how bad that would be. Like, it's like, because, but all they have is a bow and arrow to defend themselves. And then Tony grabs like a loose AK, and then she just like clumsily shoots what I call Borat to death. He's like the tall Russian guy.
Yeah. He like shoots him while falling backwards. It's like really weird, and it's how I imagine like if I ever had to shoot one, is like it would probably be something like this, where it'd be really awkward, and especially if you've never fired an automatic weapon before, which really, let's be honest, I haven't. It was like, oh, that's scary and powerful, and it's like it's kicking all around.
Yeah, it's a heavy. I mean, it's a technically medium-sized bullet, but still a heavy bullet. And, but there seems to be a lot of child soldiers out there with AKs that don't have a lot of problem with it. But that's practice. So.
Well, if you're a 90-pound woman from America, it's really hard to hang on to.
A shootout breaks out with all the Soviets. All the Soviets get shot. Two of them are dead. One makes it back to the car, and says something on the radio. Then Jed points a gun in his face, and they cut away. And you hear the gunshot.
Yeah, now that guy got blasted in the chest with a shotgun before he goes back to the car because he's.
I thought Robert just killed one of the other guys with a shotgun, and then this was like
this guy got hit with a shotgun too.
Oh, okay.
Because remember, like, because he saws down the shotgun after this.
Yeah.
But before this is like a fully linked barreled shotgun. And he just shoots this guy, and this guy's like, he just takes off running back to the car. He doesn't realize that he's like dying until he like starts stumbling towards the car. Because some people thought that scene was like, oh, that's goofy and overacted. It's like, no, he didn't know he was dead yet. He hadn't bled out entirely. Because he was just scared because this loud explosion happened. He's like, what's going on?
But even though like they cut away to hear the gunshot, it seems like everyone's sad that like Jed had to kill somebody, even though they just all killed somebody. It was kind of weird.
Well, Jed didn't kill a guy that was actively trying to kill him.
Yeah, nobody else really had to look somebody in the eye as they shot them in the face.
No, and Jed's using like a Winchester like an old cowboy revolver.
Yeah,
which is like, well, that's just jingoism right there. So yeah, it was kind of a weird scene because the Russian guy didn't want to die either because he like looked away at the last, like he didn't want to look at the barrel of the gun. So it was for the 80s, for this kind of movie, it was actually a good scene because it would be horrible just to like have to walk up and shoot someone like that. But you could have just waited, like you could have just shot the radio and just, okay, this guy's gonna bleed out, and like just sit there with your watch. Come on.
Yeah, there's a reason like these infantry guys end up having like way more like mental issues because of warfare, what it does to them, because they have to shoot people they see up close.
Yeah, that'd be super fucked up.
But artillery people generally don't have that problem because they don't see the hundreds of people they kill. They just walk up to the dead bodies like, huh, that's interesting. All these people died.
Yeah, man to man, like the three guys that are like handing off those shells. Oh, they're killing way more people.
Yes.
Sometimes
hundreds. I don't know how the statistics now, but like back when I read this On Killing book, which is still a good book, even though the author is a complete asshole now, but it's still a fascinating book.
What's his name? Yeah.
But yeah, like the majority of killing in warfare is done by artillery and not in like close combat with rifles and stuff like that, even though that's what you think is going on.
Even
by a
in
significant
wars, even like in World War II and World War I, is just like soften them up with the artillery and then go in.
Yeah, it's almost like a 10-to-1 thing. It's like 10 people are killed by artillery to 1 person killed by a rifle fire. So it's pretty.
Well, imagine the bomber guys in World War II, especially like the Allied bomber guys. Like, oh, these are just cities full of people. Like, I mean, we have to destroy them because they put like.
But they're far enough away. You just tell them like that's a factory, and then you find out later on. Apparently that was a college. We just bombed.
Why can't you tell? It's all the flak makes it hard to see.
Yeah, it can't be a college who puts anti-air around a college.
Yeah. Well, that's what the Russians did. Like they actually thought that was a deterrent. Like in the 50s, it's like, oh, we're going to build like the tank factory and put like silos for nuclear missiles in our cities. Because, the Allies kind of lamented that bombing in World War II. And it's like we were drawing up our plans. It's like, oh, they're doing that. Okay, well, we'll use 5 nuclear bombs instead of 3 to make sure we get it. Because, we can't target it that accurately. And the Russians were horrified. Like there was a city called, it's a city where ballet was like the Russian tradition of ballet was created. I think it was called Orel, and they had like 1 munitions plant there that made, I don't know, it wasn't nuclear stuff. It was like bullets or whatever, let's say. And they found out after the end of the Cold War, it's like, how many nuclear weapons did you have targeted towards like one of our cultural centers? Like, oh, 5. It's like, why 5? It's like, well, you had a munitions plant there. We had to make sure to destroy it. And maybe the first one wouldn't go off or the second one would miss or, so we like targeted, and it was a city of like 10,000 people. But because they had 1 bullet plant there, they literally would have just been like annihilated, like incinerated. And it's like, yeah, don't put your munitions plants, right in the middle of, like we didn't put like the nuclear bomb plant in New York City for a reason, even though New York City was targeted by over. Oh, I mean, they don't exactly. I heard up to 32 warheads were aimed at New York City because you destroy the world center of commerce. You just destroy like a large part of our government. Like, there's so many reasons New York's fucked. Yeah. But it's still like 32, and in the multi-megaton range, you guys are insane. Like that place would be deader than the surface of the moon. Well, because the Russian missiles could be even into the 80s, could be off by as much as a kilometer. Like, that's how poorly targeted they were. Anyway, we're getting off subject here.
We cut to Robert sawing off the barrel of a shotgun. He says killing is good. Because they're asking, like, what's it like to kill a guy? He's like, killing is good. Which is like, Robert is just this tragic character throughout. It's not like, oh, he became brave. It's like, no, he became psychotic to survive. Yeah. He's not a glorious person.
It's like, do you like doing this? No, but yes. Why do you like killing people? Because it enables me to feel for a few seconds. Or I got to shut that shit down. And it's like, wow. Does this? I don't know. I've never had these experiences, but it's like, does this really happen to people? I guess it does.
Matt wants Erica,
especially like insurgent type warfare, where you're the insurgent. Like, there's no like cafe you go to, like, oh well, the day's fighting is done. Time to like drink tequila and play Call of Duty. It's like, no, these guys never. That's like why the Afghanis and the Viet Cong. It's like, well, they're so insane. The fighters are like crazy. It's like, yeah, they never stop. There's no R&R. Like, remember that in Apocalypse Now, it was like They don't fly in the steaks and beer for Charlie. Like, no, they don't get that.
Charlie don't surf.
Charlie don't surf. What would they say R&R for Charlie was? It's like a little rat meat, back in action. Like,
Which I'm not sure how much like they knew. I mean, they knew the Afghan war was going on at the time, but I'm not sure like the details they knew, because this is very much basically the Afghan war, but what if America?
Oh, I guarantee you details got filled. I'm surprised like some of our heroes from Charlie Wilson's War, like names didn't appear in the credits of the movie. I guarantee you information filtered out. So it's probably a lot of like right-wing CIA guys that John Milius was their hero. It's like, give him you can give him so we don't go to prison, but make him, make this into an Afghan war propaganda film.
Well, I mean, before this movie got released, it got screened. They had a screening with a bunch of like veterans and like Alexander Haig and all those people, and
Ronald Reagan watched this.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And and like a bunch of like
Nancy, this is a dream come true.
But a lot of the veterans like thanked John for this movie because like, you finally get it, which isn't necessarily like that he glorified people. It's like, yeah, this is what it takes to fight a war.
Yeah, you're always looking for food.
Matt wants Erica to do the dishes, and so she yells at him, and he's like, "Hey, what's up her ass?" And she flips out about that, so that presumes that that's what the attempted rape was about, and then she says she'll kill him, and so then Matt starts doing the dishes,
which was like super sexist on his part. He's like, "Do something useful, do these dishes," and it's like, these two chicks just helped you kill a bunch of Russians. Like, you're all kind of co-equal. Like, they weren't at camp, like, feeding babies. Like, they were stabbing these guys or shooting them or whatever.
It's actually, like, also this is where I remember, like, because I think there's something, because these two were paired together, or not these two, because this is Erica, so that's Leah Thompson, but Jennifer Grey and Charlie Sheen were paired together in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and also Jennifer Grey and Patrick Swayze, of course, were paired together in Dirty Dancing. So
it was so weird to watch this movie again because I hadn't seen it, and it's like, oh my god, this is the last reunion of every other movie from the 80s.
And of course, Leah Thompson went on to do Back to the Future and a bunch of other stuff too. So,
yeah, the people that are still alive, they're in their 60s now. Really makes you feel old.
Yeah.
Like these people will be collecting Social Security in 2 years.
We cut to Colonel Bella. He's like the Cuban colonel. He wants the guerrillas brought out and killed. Well, at least that's what I infer on it, because again, I didn't get the subtitles for this. But I'm thinking he's being berated by one of the Russian guys.
Poking the other guy's chest and yelling in Spanish. He wanted somebody dead.
We cut to Bella's meeting the mayor. This is Lane Smith. He's like a character actor. I most know him as like Coach Bombay from Mighty Ducks, but he's been in a bunch of things.
I remember this guy from all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
Daryl is his son, who's like, the class president. Mayor Bates is trying to convince Bella that his son isn't violent. Like, oh, he's a leader, but he doesn't have a violent bone in his body.
Yeah.
I like here that also like the Soviets refer to the Boy Scouts as a paramilitary organization.
Yep, it is.
We cut to day.
They got your like anti-communist merit badge. You could learn, like, if you became an Eagle Scout, they taught you like karate. All right. We could ask Dad about that. Dad was like a Eagle Scout or something.
I was like, what they call a Life Scout, which is the next one down. So, it was all boring and some nonsense.
I like the scouts you could be from. Remember Welcome to Night Vale, the like PBS radio thing about the crazy sci-fi town.
Oh, vaguely. Sorry.
You're like an Eternal Scout, Dark Scout, and, just like you had strange necromantic powers. Like, I want to be an Eternal Scout.
We cut the day, and Americans are being forced to dig graves for Soviet casualties. We see Matt's hiding in the grass, like scouting. Then they line up all the Americans at a pit, so it's like, oh, well, these people are about to all be shot. And
I knew it
someone,
was bullshit because they had them dig the graves and they put the coffins in, but they didn't cover them. It's like they're not going to shoot them now. They're going to wait till they cover those graves and then shoot them.
Yeah.
They're not covering the Soviet graves and then covering these people. You never get the communists to do that in one day. That's against their contract.
Some of the Americans start singing "America the Beautiful" as they're lined up to be shot. They're gunned down with like heavy caliber machine. It's like all mounted guns on tanks and APCs, which those are all like 50 cal. So
yeah, and these people just like, and they fall over. No, they're just blown to bits. Like their arms and legs would be coming off. Firing with a 12.7 millimeter cannon.
Matt sees his dad killed, so he's immediately, just emotional after that. Mayor Bates is there. He's like sickened by it, but he's like, well, there's nothing I can do. Like, and there isn't, but what's he going to like defiantly join in as he's just killed in the middle of a field nobody knows about? So,
yeah. Yeah. No one's like, I'm going to be gunned down in a field where no one will know where I'm buried. That's going to be my stand. Nobody does that.
This is where we cut to. Jed tells everyone to not cry because he learns that his dad died, so he's like, turn it into something else. It's like turn that crying into like fighting the rush. Nobody has an accent. I just do that for the that
the dialogue sounds like it should be delivered in an accent.
Yes, the stupid man voice, like stop crying. It's like only pansies cry.
Dads die. Yeah. We come into this world like knowing it ain't gonna be forever. We're gonna go sometimes. Like everyone says all this stuff until they find out they have cancer. It's like, why would God do this to me? It's like, well, what the hell do you think was gonna happen?
Dad died so we could have a fever to kill more Roskies.
Yeah.
This is a gift from our father that he was assassinated by Russia.
This is Dad's gift of rage. All those beatings are going to pay off now. That's what good parenting is about. Remember, he said, avenge me. He knew.
And also at this point, Robert is just fully turned into an emotionless killer, so he's fine with killing.
Yeah, Robert's like ready. He's primed. He's like, if he lives through this, he is going to become like the main character in American Psycho.
We got to the next day. A Soviet tank parks at a gas station. Tony pulls up and they like sexually assault her and try to run after her. She gets away. They take her back.
Coolest scenes of the movie. I always wanted to do this.
They take her baskets, which they're like, "Hey, we want food too." So apparently, everyone's struggling for food.
Well, remember the wheat harvest failed Ukraine.
So apparently, Russia stole all of Cuba's food. They took all their bananas or whatever. So they take her basket and put it in the tank, which has a bomb in it. So that blows up, and they chase her. They chase her when the bomb goes off. And then as they're chasing her in the field, Jed and gang pop up out of the ground. They kill the whole tank crew.
It's really cool. They almost like didn't choreograph it right because the guys are like halfway past them.
Yeah,
like these guys are popping up. They're almost having to shoot sideways. It's like, whoa, you're gonna blast your own guy. Your field of fire is a little fucked up there. But
yeah, they're kids. What do they know about warfare? So
I don't know anything about it either. I just read books.
Then we got to like more Americans are about to be executed, but then Jed and the gang show up and kill the Soviets. This is where Aardvark yells "Wolverines" after their school mascot. So
yeah,
we have more montage of the Wolverines ambushing Soviets. They start leaving like spray paint tags to saying Wolverine, so they know it is. So they're basically starting a fear campaign.
Yeah.
Then they come to Colonel Bella, who like looks over the casualties, and he's confused how they can't kill a bunch of kids, or do they know it's a bunch of kids? I don't know.
Well, it's just basically like how are these like hill people or are these like country people doing this to us? It's there must be something larger. It's always they're trying to make it like something larger because the Soviet hierarchy is upset that we're not like quelling this and their people are being killed, and It's like, it must be bigger. It can't just be these people.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, your guys are like obvious buffoons, and like, yeah, let's just slaughter these people's family members. It's like, why are they fighting back? Damn it! It's like, I don't know.
Tony walks out of some business, and she gets hit on. And then she quickly walks away. He's like, "Yeah, I'll bring my friend." And he's like, "Ah, cool." They stands there. Then this is the friendship center. It gets blown up.
Yeah, which I thought was a nice touch.
Then we cut to there's like streaks of like from what they call those jet streaks in the sky or whatever. There's
Contrails.
You see a bunch of contrails. An explosion can be heard, and then Erica follows it, and then she finds an ejected American pilot here, played by Powers Booth, who's Andy, Lieutenant Colonel Andrew something. I don't know. I just have him listed as Andy here because that's what he is in the credits.
Powers Booth, your guide to the apocalypse.
We last saw in Extreme Prejudice, which was also was a story by credit by John Milius, so he used Powers Booth a few times. She asks him like what's the capital of Texas, thinking like he might be a plant, and he says like Austin, and then she says no, it's Houston. And he just like hey, I'm tired, you idiot.
Yeah.
Then they cut to like them, they're on a fire, and he tells them that he flew F-15 Eagles. He says something about like, why'd you get shot down? And he's like, well, I shot down 4 out of the 5 that were chasing me. So apparently the Russians have
actually as good as the F-15 Eagle is actually, that's a realistic number. Like,
yeah,
it's like the best fighter ever made that no one's ever heard of.
Well, yeah, it's good. Well, it's like, yeah, the Tomcat got all the glory and Top Gun, but the F-15, I believe, I don't know, maybe it's changed now because it's in all different countries now because it's like an old plane now, but like in its combat record, basically it's never been shot down.
Yeah.
But I don't know. There's only so much combat it's been in, so.
No, it's the best plane in the world. Like it's shot down so many things, and I think the Israelis, like, I still think that's their main fighter.
Yeah, well, I mean, but all the modern fighters could run circles around it, but for its time in existence as a main plane, it was one of the best fighters in the world. So.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Here,
the modern fighters that are actually in service, you mean like all 50 of them? Yeah, they can
well, it's that vectored thrusting, which could literally make them run circles around these planes.
Yeah.
They can fly standing up and just shoot up the belly. These F-15s can't do that. Andy tells them how like the Soviets invaded through like commercial jets, which I guess they said that this is what they did in Afghanistan, and then they coordinated nuke strikes, but now it's a conventional war, so everyone's agreed to not shoot nukes. They also said apparently China was on their side because like NATO's been dissolved, so Europe's not involved. They're not going to help out America, but apparently China was on our side and they got nuked because he said like 600 million Chinamen were going to help us out, but like they're having a little trouble. And he's like, wasn't there a billion? He's like, there was.
Yeah.
So presumably that's a nuke strike. We actually don't know. Maybe they conventionally killed 500 million people.
No, you can only get those numbers with that's I think over because 1 million's mega death. I think 100 million is what you call giga death. That's really hard to attain conventionally. I mean, that's a lot of bullets. So, yeah. So our only allies in the universe of Red Dawn are the UK and China.
Yeah, and they said UK is about to fall too. So
yeah. But I don't know how that would happen because at that time in Thatcher's UK they had over 500 nuclear weapons. But you're not invading the UK for the same reason you're not invading the United States. It's similar dynamic.
Yeah,
it's the nightmare to land troops there.
We cut to Robert wakes up Andy because they're gonna go shoot up an armored column. He's like, "Oh yeah, I guess that's what we do."
Yeah, Powers Booth like performance in this is amazingly low key and fun.
Yeah.
It's like you can tell he was the funnest guy on the set. It's like I'm just enjoying the shit out of this.
And then they cut to them shooting up an armored column like they said they would. And we cut to night. Andy talks about like the horrors elsewhere, like, and then he's talking to Robert. He's like, "All that hate's gonna burn you up, kid." And he's like, "It keeps me warm." So, like apparently he says like everyone else, like everyone's starving, so he's like, them eating beans is a luxury that they don't know they have.
Yeah, because they said like, what did he say? Like in Phoenix or whatever, they slit your throat to have that spoonful of beans, and like the funeral pyres at night light up the skies, and it's like, oh yeah, and that's actually like real stuff because if you're I've read all these books about this different scenarios, and like if you're not in the Midwest in America and there is some kind of like quasi World War III / nuclear type invasion or whatever, you're going to see people starve to death in this country very quickly because where they don't produce food, because if you live in the South, you're screwed because all the food gets trucked down there unless it's like chicken farms and hog farms and stuff. If you live in the cities, you're screwed because like once the food stops showing up, that's it. So yeah, anywhere that's not like the Midwest, like the West or the West Coast or California, like or Texas, is like there's no food going on there. There's also no water because it's not being pumped in that situation either.
Yeah,
that's the other thing. Like Los Angeles would be a ghost town in 2 weeks. People just start walking east because there's no water being pumped in. So.
We cut to Andy stands before like a makeshift monument to like their lost parents, or everybody know it's just a rock they carved the names in. Erica does some weird flower thing with Andy where she keeps putting like a flower in his pocket. And apparently Erica's like nearly mute now or whatever. I don't know. They kind of say that. It's like Matt's like, she doesn't talk anymore. It's like, well, she's not talking to you anymore, but
yeah. Because you just want her to do the dishes, and you're like, make me a sandwich, bitch, every time. She's not talking to you. You're an asshole. You're acting like Charlie Sheen. You're tiger blood, and that's why she doesn't like you.
Andy has a model set up where they're planning an attack, and then after he's done talking, they're like, "What's a flank?" and stuff like that. He just like puts his head in his hands, like, "Oh."
Yeah. What's a defilade? What's a flank? Like,
cut to them carrying out the attack. They start passing off rifles to prisoners they free. There's this really awkward moment where like Andy blows up a Soviet pilot in his plane, and it's like he throws like, I don't know, like 3 things of explosives in the plane, but then he like flips them off and throws a grenade in, and the guy's just looking forward and like not staring at him. It's like, yeah, it's really awkward. And then the plane blows up and he dies.
And these are obvious like wood mock-ups of planes, because when one of them explodes, it just like flips it, like cuts in half, and the front of it just falls down like, perfectly. And it's like, oh yeah, that's where the glue failed.
Then we cut to morning. There's more Bella being angry, and the Soviets are like executing people. Then we cut to the Wolverines are playing football. Here, Erica and Andy like flirt a little bit, and then while he tells stories of his wife that he doesn't know whether she's alive or not. Yeah, interesting that this is a completely sexless movie. Although it seemed like there would be like that would be a thing with kids like caught out in the wood and all alone.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like that in this situation because it's like, because I try to imagine myself as like, okay, what if I was 18 in the woods? It's like, ooh, there's chicks here. But it's like, oh yeah, I just blew some guy's brains out of the back of his skull. I don't think I'm going to be all sexed up. Like, I am just going to sit there and quietly eat beans and be like, am I going to hell? This is not what they taught me in church. It's going to happen. I'm just eating these beans. Make me a sandwich, bitch.
We cut to the Wolverines are at Mr. Mason's house again. He tells them rumors that the like special forces might get sent in spring. Then we cut to it's winter, so spring's pretty far off. Well, I guess it's like 4 months off or whatever. Yeah.
In terms of the amount of food these people are going to have to eat, it's going to be, it might as well be 2 years.
Yeah. The Wolverines spot U.S. planes bombing Soviet positions. There's lots of really big explosions here. It looks really cool.
Very Apocalypse Now, like
Yeah,
those line explosions that they do.
yeah,
It's supposed to represent napalm or something. Yeah.
yeah. Andy tries to convince Jed that like his war is over, and like I think I missed a point here where it seems like they're trying to get Andy back to like free America or something, and that's what they're doing. And he's like trying to convince Jed to come with him so that like like, hey, you've done enough fighting, your war's over. But I think I might have missed something here. I'm not sure.
No, that is what they're. He's an F-15 pilot, so
Yeah.
they're trying to get him back because they obviously need the guy with
Yeah.
those kind of skills. But he's like convincing them. It's like, no, don't. I don't just want to take the two girls with me and the one guy. It's like, you should all come with me. Like, you've done enough. This is, wait till the spring offensive or whatever. I don't think he says it like that, but it's basically like, you're gonna die here if you keep doing this. This is not a winnable situation for you. And Jed just won't. He's just like resting on pride. Like, no, this is what I'm supposed to do. And it's like, you're just gonna die stupid, and or you're gonna die for stupid reasons. Like, this isn't really like super effective. This isn't changing the course of the war. Which he's right in the end. It's like, yeah, this guy was right.
And then a Russian tank rolls up, and the Wolverines kind of get caught in a crossfire between a U.S. tank and a Russian tank, and they're like in a mound just in front of the tank, so the tank can't see them. But when the cannon goes off, it's like that's very loud and cause makes all the kids scared and stuff, because that would be, and they're also, the U.S. tank is returning fire, not knowing you're there because they're in camouflage.
Yeah.
Especially that
that
distance.
Abrams tank they had returning, that was also another wood mock-up they made of an Abrams.
Yeah.
They couldn't get an actual Abrams. They tried, because they usually, like the National Guard or whatever, like, yeah, we could get, well, National Guard didn't have any at that time.
Yeah.
So they had what did the guy say? They had like the Patton tanks or whatever. But yeah, they couldn't get an Abrams, but the Abrams look like in the 80s, like when those came out, those look like future vehicles. Because they were all angular and weird, and it's like, oh, that looks like something from science fiction. So, yeah, they mocked one up for this scene.
Yeah, so yeah, some of the kids start freaking out, and the cannon fire goes off like right in front of them. Andy starts like taking on the tank, so he's like crawling up there, like shooting in, trying to drop grenades in. Aardvark gets up there too. He gets shot to death, and he just like body hangs on the turret on the cannon.
The turret's rotating, and this guy's body is hanging off it because another tank pulls up, and the top gunner or whatever they call those guys are shooting with a machine gun at the people attacking the other tank.
Yeah. And this is also the first time one of the Wolverines has been killed, so this is like, things aren't going well. They aren't. Yeah. Then Andy gets hit by grenade shrapnel that one of the tank threw outside and popped back into the tank. So he's dying, so he pops red smoke so that the U.S. Army tank can like hit the tank he's on. And so, yeah, that tank gets blown up, and so Andy's dead. And then Erica... And then we cut to like, yeah, they're like, they get away from there, and we cut to Erica cries over the death of Andy, saying she'll never love again. And then Robert kind of consoles her very poorly.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, it's okay. We'll just do some more killing. It'll be all right.
I know this sucks right now, but we're going to kill some more people. That's going to make you feel better. Think about their warm blood running across your hands,
So like, this is their
but it's like yeah. What he says. So might as well.
This is their first setback, so like people are kind of like losing their will to fight. It's like, is this all, like, this is also a weird thing, because like they're like, in the middle part here where it's like glorious, like this is the glory of war, we're all like taking on the Russians and nobody gets killed. It's like, you figured like, well, at this point, like, and they've built their own like kind of like like mythos. You're like, well, people should be joining them.
Yeah.
But nobody does.
Because they're passing out guns at the refugee or at the re-education camp like they're candy.
Yeah.
And it's like, just come on, do this, kill them all. You'd think like 50 people would be in the woods with them at this point. Like, yeah, this sucks, but the education camp sucked worse. And they killed my wife and they shot my kid at the school. It's like, I'm with you guys. No matter, you want me to strap like a bandolier of grenades on and run into a building? I'll do that. You know, I got nothing left. This doesn't happen, which is weird. But
Which I think maybe like they're just keeping to themselves and like, they can barely feed themselves. So they probably don't want more
yeah,
people. Because there is a scene that got cut from this movie where like they end up like shooting up a house they think there's Soviets in. And when they go in the house, there's a little girl in there. She's not shot, but then they give her some food. And then like as they walk away, is like, we probably should have just killed her because she's just another mouth to feed.
yeah, useless eater. Start getting real hardcore.
So yeah, they cut that from the movie. It's like, yeah, it's a bit too hardcore.
Yeah, that's too dark.
Then we cut to his titles. Just say February. The Soviets are marching through town. Some Soviet general shows up to lecture the troops. He explains like what a Wolverine is. Again, this scene was nearly impossible for me to read because I have no subtitles. But he's given a presentation, explains what a Wolverine is.
Yeah, it's basically an angry rodent. That's what he says.
And they have like the yearbook photos up of all the Wolverines, so they think they know who they are. So, which is probably even more of like insulting to them. Like, it's a bunch of high school kids. They haven't even finished high school. Like, what do they know? Why are we being defeated by them?
When in like reality, like the high school like quarterback at that time would have been almost an inch or two taller than anyone in the Soviet Union. Would have, and just in raw muscle mass, would have weighed like 70 pounds more than me. It's like, oh, we shouldn't be ashamed we're being defeated by these people. It's actually an honor. These people are like Vikings compared to us because they actually have food here in America. So yeah.
And then without training, they use all our weapons against us. They're really smart. Yeah, they only make the Wolverines like steal a lot of RPGs and use them pretty extensively on armored vehicles. So like, they figure that stuff out pretty quickly. So
yeah, I love the RPG. By the way, all the RPGs in this movie also mock-ups because again, not generally available like before later. Now I think everyone has one. I have one right over here. But no, yeah, the RPGs in this movie are kind of funny because they're like, as a practical effect, because they're like Estes rocket kits you build as a kid because they always seem to fire in a straight line and they're really slow. When you actually see an RPG fired, it's like suddenly it's there and then it isn't. It's like oh, it's like instantly gone. Whereas in this movie they have a slow like arc. Like you could almost like whack it out of the way with a baseball bat if you were quick enough.
Well, in some scenes you can clearly see the line that they attached a a firecracker to and like or bottle rocket to or whatever.
Which is fine because it's the 80s and it's the best they can do.
We cut to the Soviets are out hunting for the Wolverines. One of them has some sort of tracker. Even though like the Soviets have the advantage, the Wolverines get the upper hand and gun them all down.
Oh, these guys are like Spetsnaz. Like this is like Russian special forces is out tracking these guys down. Which after the fall of the Soviet Union, what I learned is like, yeah, this is probably actually how it would go. The Russians were that bad then and now. I mean, they're fighting a war right now where they're invading a country right next to them, and they're not doing well.
Robert goes around killing all the wounded soldiers with his sawn-off shotgun. They take one of the Soviets hostage and they interrogate him about the tracking device, but of course they don't know what he's saying. Then Matt figures out how the tracking device works, and the group learns that like Daryl sold them out because she said he got caught looking for his dad, and the Soviets made him swallow a tracker.
Yeah.
And so they're debating.
It's like, as much as you're eating, wouldn't you have crapped that out already? You're just eating constantly. We just ate an elk yesterday.
They're debating killing the Soviet and Daryl. Matt says we're not doing this, and then Jed can't bring himself to kill Daryl in front of everybody. Well, I mean, he probably couldn't kill him if nobody was there either. But so then Robert just does it, and then there's a great unease.
I like how Robert's like perfectly willing. From the beginning, I'll kill him. I remember when me and my friends were watching this movie like 25 years ago or whatever. It's like, yeah, that's the guy you want on your side. I'll kill my friend. Hey, no sweat. Let's just get the shotgun and blow his head right off his shoulders. It's like no.
So I have that being the end of Act 2. So we have Act 3. Jed goes off alone to cry. He cries a lot.
Yeah.
Going against his own rules. And we see that, like, this being a man thing is, it's all persona.
Yeah. It's always bullshit. I mean, it's never good. You're going to cry no matter how hard you try.
Yeah.
You're going to cry.
We cut to the Wolverines are scouting a convoy. They're about to blow it up, but the convoy has like some supplies fall off the back of the truck, and then Jed sends Tony out to look at the supplies because I forgot this movie because I was thinking of it's like a whole time like, oh, they got to get ambushed. This is probably like a ploy because you figure after like, oh, the sending the Spetsnaz after him with tracking device, that's just the first ruse or first wave and trying to get them, but it ends up being the supplies they just fell off the back of a truck and they're going to eat it, but they start eating it like they haven't eaten for days.
Yeah. They're like shoving mangoes in their mouth. It's like, the skin of those is toxic, right?
They go back to the rock with the monument rock with their names on it, and so they eat like they're starving, which they probably are. Tony kind of flirts with Jed by like squeezing the orange juice on top of his head. But that's about it. So that's the only thing that indicates like, oh, they have a relationship.
Yeah. There's something round he would like to squeeze also.
They hear a helicopter somewhere nearby, but they don't know where. And then the Russian gunships start showing up and they lay down fire. Tony gets hit, which again, those helicopters have huge guns on them, so her whole torso would be gone. But yeah, whatever.
Yeah, it wouldn't be as fun if the Wolverines were just dragging like the upper half of their body. It's kind of dark, so they probably. Let's just assume they're firing BB guns, like high velocity.
2 more choppers show up. The Wolverines get on a horseback and run away. Tony falls off the horse. Jed grabs her and they kind of just runs her off and to near a tree. Robert faces off of the gunship and he hits it with a rocket, but it's still operational. It's just kind of like wounded.
Yeah.
And then he's kind of standing and they're playing triumphant music. So he's like, oh, did they succeed? And then the other gunships go up and they just shoot Robert dead. Yeah. Showing that there is no glory in this whatsoever.
Who's the triumphant music for? Oh, the hind pilot.
The choppers leave. Jed stays with the dying Tony. She asks him to kill her, but he can't do it. So then she asks for a grenade. So he puts it in her hand and pulls the pin. And he says, and she goes, "I'm just gonna stay here and listen to the wind for a while," which is really sad.
Yeah, imagine that, like, this is my last moment on Earth. I'm gonna just be holding the spoon on a grenade, and I hope when I die, like someone flips my body over, and kills him. It's like, you'll be my servants in hell.
Yeah, some of the choppers land and some of the troops get out and they find Tony's body, or just one guy, and so her dead body drops a grenade and gets one last kill.
Yep.
And then they cut to Jed carves Tony's name into the rock too, and I presume Robert's name, but I can't remember. Probably presume. Then we cut to Matt is sending Erica and Danny away because like Jed and Matt are going to go off on a suicide mission.
Yeah.
And they say something like somebody's got to tell the tale. So Erica and Danny like head off to like where they presume free America is. Matt and Jed are wearing like Soviet gear, but just like over top of their normal clothes. So it's like, he's got his Letterman jacket and then like some sort of like, like soldier snowsuit on top of it.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Oh yeah, and then we cut to like Bella. Colonel Bella is like he has like a voiceover of a note he wrote to somebody, because I actually don't know because I didn't get the subtitles here. I don't know who. I presume he's like writing to his wife or something, or maybe his kids.
That was to his son.
Okay, that makes sense. Basically, this is where he's like conflicted about like basically like I was a revolutionary and now I'm on the other side. So I think I don't know. You got subtitles. What was going on here?
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't like the fact that he's like fighting for the system now.
Yeah.
It's just the Soviet system, which is one he believed in, but now he sees like, oh, these guys are just crushing, normal people just like the Americans did. It's like it's
Yeah.
the same thing. I'm fighting for the same system. It's just it's like it's in the name of socialism, but it's not really. I mean, I'm kind of reading more into it than was
Yeah.
actually said, but that's essentially what he's saying.
Then the base starts exploding and the Soviets are taking gunfire. Matt and Jed are running around with guns and rockets and grenades, like, like akimbo.
Yeah, it's like
uh,
parkour, like RPG fire and stuff.
they kill a Soviet general. The backblast like like blinds some Soviet bootlicker. Matt and Jed like hop on a train and like a different Soviet general like spots them, so he goes after them. Matt gets shot and falls off the train, and then Jed pops up out of hiding as the general's looking for him. He's to say, "You lose," and then they trade fire and they both get hit, but the general dies.
That's Colonel Strelnikov.
Uh,
He's the guy who was going to set everything right, and he was using the Jetomatic submachine gun. And the reason he was using that is they couldn't get the actual fast-firing 9mm Polish submachine gun that Russian officers would have had at that time.
okay.
Because again, just not available. So you have to, make something else weird. That, it's like just a fast-firing 9mm.
And then we have an injured Jed carrying I probably dead Matt. Although some people indicate that Matt's still alive here, but I don't think I ever hear him say everything ever again. I don't know.
I always assumed he was dead. He's just
Yeah.
like taking his brother's body.
Yeah.
Because they're both just like riddled with gunfire at this point.
So he's like walking out of the base. Bella spots him and he holds a rifle on him, but seeing that they're just kids, he like lets them go, like seeing himself in them. And so Jed takes Matt to a park bench where they just presumably die leaning on each other. And he's like saying, I'm real tired, Matt." Like, yeah, I think, yeah. So I think Matt never says anything ever again. You just see like the bullet wound on his chest. Yeah. And then they just cut to morning. So it's like, oh, that's it. So I guess they're dead. No glory there. We have Erica and Danny like make it to some place and they say they're free. I think like with a question mark. There's a voiceover of Erica saying she never saw the brothers again. We cut to a panning shot of the rock of names, and the voiceover says like the war ended. She says she comes to visit the rock, but nobody else does. There's a plaque that says Partisan Rock. In the early days of World War III, guerrillas, mostly children, placed the names that are lost upon this rock. They fought here alone and gave up their lives so that this nation shall not perish from this earth. And that's the end of the movie.
Oh. And that's it.
There's no glory in war.
And this is called by some people the most popular conservative film ever made.
Yeah.
Like, I don't get that from the. It's like, oh, it's just pointless. Actually, it's just kind of pointless.
Well, here's John Milius here's a quote just directly from John Milius talking about the movie. He says, it also says that World War III is unwinnable, or we're going to win, but the cost is going to be so great. I think it shows the utter futility, the desperate futility of war. At the end of the movie, in spite of all the heroism and valor shown and the reasons and the revenges on both sides, all that's left is a lonely plaque on some desolate battlefield that nobody goes to.
Yeah. Because if it's not actually happening to you, it doesn't matter. It's like, yeah, it doesn't. And that's with every war.
Yeah.
I mean, I work with guys every day that fought in, all the most recent American wars. And it's like, yeah, you know what? I just went home and ate dinner with my family every night while that was going on. It's like, it doesn't really, resonate with me as something because it didn't affect my life directly. And, and that's kind of the sad truth of it all. It's like, and I'm into the history of this stuff. And, the different conflicts America had and the things that went on in World War II and stuff like that. But it's like, yeah, at the end of the day, it's like it's not something I experienced, so it's just kind of pictures in a book.
But I think that's what people misinterpret about this movie is at the middle of it. Yeah, it is kind of right wing jingoistic propaganda, but you have to get to the end of the movie where it wasn't worth anything.
Yeah, it just ran out of gas. It's like all that piss and vinegar. It's like, yeah, it'll get you so far, and then you're dead. And then maybe somebody might remember you.
Yeah, but nobody remembers.
Yeah, because those guys were dead. They didn't get their name written on the rock because they're dead.
Yeah, because I watched
even though like two guys destroyed like a Russian division somewhere, they would have won like congressional medals of honor any other time if they had actually pulled that off.
Well, I watched the At the Movies, their review of it, and like Siskel like thought like he like he liked the concept of it and the fantasy of it necessarily, and then Ebert was like thought it was just like right wing propaganda, and it's like it was an irresponsible movie.
Yeah, that sounds like Ebert. Yeah.
Where you're handing kids guns and like touting the glory of war. It's like, all right, yeah, you missed the point. And in that documentary I watched about Milius, they had there was like this British news broadcast talking about this being like the most violent movie ever made. Not true. Saying it was an irresponsible propaganda that was just stirring up Russians into thinking America are just war hungry like morons.
Well,
yeah,
not this movie. This movie isn't exactly directly only responsible for that.
But it's saying this movie is a saber rattling movie about like glory of war. It's like, you didn't watch the movie. That's not what this movie's about.
Yeah, this guy like didn't like end up with like the heads of those like Cuban colonels on a stick, and he's behind the big desk with his boots on it smoking a cigar. Like, if that's how the movie ended, then that's what this would have been. No, everyone dies and no one's exactly sure why or what was. I mean, you assume at the end of the movie like America won.
Yeah,
like there's a flag flying there, so you can only assume like they won. You don't know what the cost is. It's like, yeah, we won, but like it's 100 million Americans are dead. Like, it's going to take 5 generations to recover what America was in the 80s. When we were joking about the drab, screwed up city in Colorado, it's like, oh, it'll take 5 generations to regain that level of position. So it's like, did we win? I don't know.
And there's been a lot, lots of things have like done this. Like the video game realm, you have World in Conflict basically did this, but in there it was like,
yeah, I remember that.
That was about like basically like the National Guard fighting off the Russians, which is very interesting.
Was that the trailer that used the what was it? The people that I can't remember now. Damn it. It like had the Temple of the Dog soundtrack or whatever.
I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's the wrong thing, but yeah, it had a cool trailer. I remember that.
And you had like the
flying over New York, and then all of a sudden the guy's shooting the guns, and they're jumping out of the helicopter.
Well, there's also Command and Conquer Red Alert 2, which had the Soviets invading America as well.
Yeah, that's true.
So yeah, there's been a lot of like, and then Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, the original. There's a part where like the Soviets invade like Washington, and like they blow up, they do the Joe Buff thing of blowing up, using nuclear weapons in the stratosphere as an EMP to knock out the grid.
Yeah.
But not ravaging it with nuclear radiation.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is basically just so there's a lot of things about it. And of course, they released a remake in 2012, starring I completely forgot his name. Thor himself.
Oh, Liam Hemsworth.
Chris Hemsworth.
Chris Hemsworth. I don't know. I can't.
Which technically one of his first like starring roles because they shot it in 2009, and then MGM went bankrupt in 2010, so they couldn't release it. By then, he'd already been in. Well, I think he did Star Trek in 2008, where he played Kirk's father.
Yeah.
Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I just had some weird error pop up. What the? So yeah, he was in. I think in 2008 he was in the Star Trek movie as Kirk's father, where he just has a guest role there, and then by 2011 they released the Thor movie, so he's already in the Marvel universe and he's already established by then. So they filmed this in 2009, the Red Dawn movie, and it finally comes out in 2012, and so by then they were worried about the Chinese market because it was so big. So the Chinese were the bad guys in the Red Dawn remake, and so they did a lot of digital changeover and made it North Korea instead, so they could release it in the Chinese market.
Yeah, the old North Korean invasion of continental U.S.
There, it's like it's set on the coast and like in Washington and stuff. It's just kind of a joyless exercise of Red Dawn. And because it's like a post 9/11 movie, it's just extra serious and not fun. So there's no fantasy, and then when it gets dark and bleak, it doesn't hit at all. I mean, there's some kind of cool action in it because it's directed by a stunt man, but yeah, it's just not good.
It was shot in Mount Clemens, Michigan. I remember that.
Huh? Okay.
Yeah, that whole town and everything. That's all in Michigan. That's when Michigan was like, where they were making a bunch of movies because they didn't have to pay taxes.
Oh yeah.
And then that all went away because then we had whoever our governor.
But yeah, in that one they avoided having them shoot up the school. They just have like one day they wake up and the North Koreans are paratrooping in, and
I remember there's some like cool initial scenes.
Yeah.
Where it's like basically like those the Soviet mainstay. They have the big transport thing. They're like our KC-130s, but they're a lot bigger. Yeah, and there's guys just like hundreds of guys parachuting out of those, and it's like there was some initially cool scenes, but it was dumb. I remember.
Yeah,
because these guys go from being like high school kids and young kids to like just randomly like attacking convoys and doing harassing stuff to like, oh, we're special forces now and we're infiltrating. It's like, wait a minute, that's quite a transition. I think I've only watched it passively once, like, so it's
even short. It's even shorter than the original Red Dawn. It's like an hour and 30. So like they just truncate everything even more, and then it doesn't have any kind of message that's worth anything. People don't really have like the character. About the only thing interesting they do is that they kill off Jed randomly after they have like a big successful mission towards the end of the movie, and then he's just like walking in a hallway and gets shot by a sniper and dies, and then everybody's really sad about it.
Oh, okay.
And then they like leave, and it's more triumphant. So like by the end of in the original, basically everybody's dead except for two get go off to tell the story that they don't successfully do, and nobody's remembered for it. Here they get some, because the way they have America go down is they basically have some virus that just wipes out everything in America, basically EMPs everything in America.
Yeah.
And so they find some special box that will like undo it or something, and so that's supposed to be like the win in our favor after our leader is killed. So, but yeah, it's not worth it. So
no, I never I didn't care for it. I remember I watched it once, like, oh, that's sad. This is what they thought would be the thing to replace kind of an odd, quirky movie from the 80s.
Yeah, I don't know, like, I guess, I don't know, maybe it was MGM, like, because they went bankrupt, so maybe they thought, like, oh, this will get us some money, but apparently it cost them, like, $67 million, and they made, like, 30, so didn't help.
Yeah, no, this is, the 1984 Red Dawn is just like a unique product of a time and a place that doesn't exist anymore. Even though like The Onion said it was, I remember before 9/11, the Onion said like this is the official movie of the George W. Bush administration and stuff. Like, because again, this movie gets anyone who talks about this that has never watched it is like, oh, it's this jingoistic conservative like '80s Republican fantasy of America. And it's like, well, if this is anyone's fantasy, it's very bleak and you obviously don't know what you're talking about because it's like, but
I mean, that's how I always remember the movie as like, you know, the jingoistic parts, but like I never like sat down and analyzed the movie. You know, here with this, we end up doing things like, you know, making sure we know what characters' names are and stuff. So if you actually like literally pay attention to a movie, you get more out of it, it turns out.
yeah, it's better to watch it and like understand, you know, what's going on and the characters' motivations.
Yeah.
Than writing your own political polemics over it. But
it's like seeing like a screenshot of it and I know what this movie is.
yeah.
Again, you can re-edit this movie to be jingoistic nonsense, but that's if as a whole, it's not that. So
yeah, it's too bleak and it's you know, final analysis to actually be something you know, like that. Because there were movies like Rambo was like that, like the second one. You know, like that was what this movie.
We're gonna send one guy in. He's gonna win Vietnam finally for America.
We had only done this if we weren't such, you know, such cowards. It's like the coup, like Kennedy, Nixon, those cowards. Okay. Nixon bombed. You know, he bombed. You know, North Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos more than we bombed Germany in the Second World War. But yeah, so that was. Yeah, it's an interesting movie for its time and its place. It's almost innocent fun by today's standards.
Yeah.
Because it was political, but it wasn't. It wasn't what people think it is. I mean, there's some people though I've like listened to reviews of this movie, like they compare this to like a Leni Riefenstahl film about like whoa, you're absolutely like going crazy. Like this is not Nazi propaganda or anything. But again, people just have this set idea in their head about what things are.
Well, yeah, when you see like a kid,
and I know I do this too with left wing stuff because I'm like probably more conservative than liberal at this point. So because I'm just getting older and that's what happens. But I know I hear about some stuff on the internet and I'm like, oh, that's crazy what these, crazy lefties are doing. It's like, I don't understand the concept or the context of what they're doing or whatever. And I just like fly off the handle about things. I know I do that too, but this movie's had like over almost 40 years to marinate with people. It's like, you think you would know what this movie was. This isn't like new product.
Yeah, and learning about John Milius is he was just an interesting character, so that's fun. There's a documentary on Tubi called Milius, that kind of covers. Well, also I found it like he said he got blacklisted after this movie because it's like, oh, it's just political. He thought because everyone thought it was right-wing propaganda. So, but he still got to make movies like he did like the Rough Riders and stuff after this. But
yeah, again, another thing that didn't happen, just going the other direction.
And then like you always mention Rome. Well, he created Rome, so
yeah, oh yeah,
the HBO series.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, but interesting thing about that is apparently, so when what's his name is Milich, he did Deadwood.
Yeah,
I can't remember his name, but I think it's Milich is his last name. So the way they set it up is that apparently Milius's accountant had been stealing money from him, so he was broke, and his kid wanted to go to law school, and so he was trying to get like a staff writer job on Deadwood, and Milich was like, this is beneath you. You're not going to be a fucking staff writer. You're one of the most iconic writers in Hollywood. And so he just loaned him the money for his kid to go to law school. And
which, by the way, is $270,000. at the law school he wanted to go to in the early 90s or early 2000s. So keep that in mind, folks.
And apparently one day, I guess Milich was complaining to somebody. He was like, "Can you believe this asshole? He paid me back." So apparently, when Milius got the Rome job, he paid him back in full for the law school. So
Yeah, I think Milius is someone. If I actually met him, he's still alive.
yeah, he unfortunately had a stroke about
he's
10
not
years
like
ago.
talking very well, but
yeah, he has communication issues, but they say he has perfect memory. He just has trouble getting it up. I mean, not a boner, but just like getting the words in his head out to his mouth is a hard thing. So
yeah, which is terrible. It's why strokes terrify me, because it's like, oh, I'm a prisoner in my own body now. Because I work with a guy at work who had that, and like he talked just like I do right now, and then 2 years later he came back to work, and it's like we're writing stuff down. and I try to be nice, because I mean I try to be always with people that have that problem, but it's like I just start handing him pieces of paper. It's like, and he can write really fast and tell you what he wants, but he can't say it. And it's like, oh, if that happened to me, it's like, well, no more podcasts for Nathan, unless I'm just like writing shit down and holding it up.
But yeah, I mean, I saw that doc some 10 years ago, so I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure he probably got better, but I haven't seen him. I've not seen any recent interviews for the decade in between. So he's supposedly working on a Genghis Khan movie, like he was really passionate about. So I kind of doubt that will ever happen. But
yeah,
he's still an interesting guy. Watch that doc; it's on Tubi for free. And like, one of the most iconic writers in Hollywood. So, and you know what? A good guy with bad politics is still a good guy. Just, it's hard to convince them. So,
yeah, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I'm more lenient on people with bad politics too, because number one, I have a lot of bad politics, and also,
also like the politics of his that people complain about by now are very tame.
Oh yeah,
those are old bad politics that would now be just like, oh, you're kind of like,
he's like a Clinton Democrat.
Essentially, yeah.
It's like, he's probably someone I'd like to talk to.
Oh yeah, he also made
John Milius whenever because I have like the Conan the Barbarian soundtrack.
Yeah.
And so whenever I listen to like the what's the selection? Oh, Anvil of Crom, which is like the famous title role in that. It's like I always think of like some guy angrily writing a script. It's like, fuck everyone, this is my script. It's like, oh, I want to meet John Milius and talk to him.
He used to make people pay him in guns.
Yes, I remember reading about that. That's amazing. I like that.
He wouldn't take exclusively, but he was like, you're giving me my paycheck and you're getting me a gun. And then I guess he said after they started paying him like $200,000 a script, he said, you can buy your own goddamn gun.
Yeah. Yeah. If I was paying this guy like $250,000, it's like, well, you go buy whatever the hell you want to with the money I'm going to give you, because I'm not going through these legal hoops to get you a machine gun or whatever you want.
Yeah, and like his soft like blackballing from Hollywood kind of came out of the stories of either that did or did not happen, but it's Hollywood, so they're not gonna let truth get in the way of a good story. So
yeah.
A lot of stuff of him about like just pulling guns on people, like not on them, but like he just like set a gun on the table, like it's like, with a producer, it's like, all right, so what are we talking about? It's like, clear intimidation tactics. It's just kind of but vagary as to what his intent is. Or
see, now I would love that as a producer. I was immediately like, I'm gonna like try to pick it up. Like, what did you got here? It's just like rolling it around to see if it's loaded or whatever. It's like, hey, John, this isn't loaded. I'm not scared. You got to load it the next time. I don't know why people freak out about that. It's like, I just go crazy.
Or the other thing, which is the opposite we are talking about, they're doing the voiceover at Apocalypse Now, and John Milius is trying to coerce like a performance out of I'm forgetting his name, Estevez. What's his name?
Martin Sheen.
Oh yeah, Martin Sheen. Sorry, Estevez was the name. The other guy chose. Yeah, so he's trying to get a
real name, but yeah.
Oh, okay. So he was trying to coax a performance out of Martin Sheen, and so he pulls out his 45, puts it on the table next to him, and he tells him to hold it. He's like, "It's locked and loaded, ready to go. Now read your lines."
That's great. That's brilliant. I love that. I mean, that is a genius, like, showing you his craft. Here's a loaded handgun. Now say this dialogue. I mean, that's actually effective. I like that. Not going to say that's wrong in that context,
I can't remember if, I don't know. I feel like Ron Swanson would be based on Milius or something, because I'm not sure if it was him that had like a claymore on his desk that said front towards enemy. I know that's also something that Ron Swanson had in an episode, or it was there the whole time. I can't remember. Some people say that John Goodman's character in The Big Lebowski is based off of John Milius.
I could see that.
Because he has like
I've watched like a bunch of John Milius interviews. It's like, yeah, I could sort of see like this guy straying into that territory.
So yeah, John Milius, interesting guy, contrarian in Hollywood. Part of the and like that's the interesting thing is like he was a part of that USC mafia group, but like he never became a billionaire or a multi-million. Well, he probably multi-millionaire at one point, but but also like he gave away a lot of stuff for free. Like he was a big idea guy, so it's like in that documentary, basically he's like attached to almost every great Hollywood movie that was ever made because he was just such a great writer or great idea guy, and he just liked to like work together with people, so he didn't necessarily like strive for credit and politic his way in that way. He was just like, well, we're friends, we like to make movies together, and that just doesn't happen nowadays because everybody needs credit for everything, which they should and do, but it's just different.
That's like the Harlan Ellison thing, like pay the writer. It's like, I'll do the work. And everyone hated Harlan Ellison for that. Because like John Milius was almost the opposite of Harlan Ellison. John Milius was like, yeah, I'll give you my ideas just in hope of gratitude later, or just because I want to.
Yeah, I want to see this. This is my idea. And
you're so many ideas. It's like there isn't a limit of idea bank here. Like I don't have X amount of ideas and then I'm fucked. Whereas like the Harlan Ellison school is like, I have 10 great ideas, and if you steal 9 of them, I'm screwed. I'm be the most litigious writer in the world because I can, and also I'm violent and angry, which was John Milius, but for a different reason.
Yeah, also John Milius was married like 4 times, so
Yeah. I mean, John Milius is a guy like. It's like, why do we like Clinton? Why do we like Quentin Tarantino? What? I mean, this is Nathan like talking. Like, what do I like the most about Quentin Tarantino? The dialogue.
Yeah,
I could give a shit less about the rest of this. I mean, some of the stuff he does now is cool, and this, the Rashomon story stuff he did in Pulp Fiction is cool. I just like the dialogue, and why is like that's how people talk and act, especially. And it sounds outrageous, but it's like, no, these people are like acting in a persona of like, I'm the ultimate gangster, I'm the ultimate badass, so of course they talk that way. Yeah, it's ridiculous and over the top, but that's how those guys talk in real life. Like that's how criminals talk and act, because most of them are dumb and it's all ego driven and it's all machismo. So when Quentin Tarantino does it, it's brilliant because it's like, yeah, he captures the essence of what these people do and say. And that's what John Milius does in his writing and some of like the speeches in like Sudden Impact or Magnum Force or all the Dirty Harry movies. Is like, yeah, people would love to talk that way. They don't, but it's because it never comes up. When have you in your life or me in my life had that opportunity to say the 44 Magnum is the most powerful handgun? At this range, it could blow your head clean off your body. It can't because it's not big enough, but it's great to say. But we never get a chance to say that. But he brings that a lot.
And even like Dirty Harry, which you see as like kind of gets seen as like a right wing character, which he is. But like in the end of the day, it's like, well, he's just a guy that kills people presumably on the good side.
Yeah, he's like Judge Dredd for San Francisco in the 70s or whatever.
Yeah. Like, he's not a good person. He's just on your side.
Yeah. This isn't a guy you want over for dinner, but you're glad he's out there because you don't have to go deal with these psychopaths because he's going to literally cut them in half with the.
He's your psychopath.
Yeah, he's your bad guy. Which that makes sense.
That's always interesting in cinema, and that's what John Milius always loved to delve into that stuff. So even though he wrote like these characters that get seen as, when you turn them into one-dimensional stuff, it's like, yeah, this is just right-wing propaganda, but he always had the other side too, where it's like, well, you're not supposed to like this guy. He's just like holy. You're just supposed to like the idea of him solving terrible problems, so you don't have to.
Well, that's what I like about like John Milius writing from like all the way back through the modern times. But it's like, yeah, those are all just like Dirty Harry, Conan the Barbarian. Those are all just the blue collar guys that fix your toilet. You don't want to know how the toilet is fixed. You just need to know that it's fixed. And these are their stories, which you never get to hear. And when you do hear them, everyone's like poo-poos them, is like, oh, that's too simplistic and violent and barbaric. And it's like, yeah, dude, that's what most of life is. Like it or not, that's what life is. It's like no one thinks that's good. No one wants their kids to grow up to be that thing. But you know what? You need those guys. Otherwise, the toilets don't flush. Or whatever else you want to, So that's why I'm like, oh, this is why I like this stuff. It's not just because I'm like nascently conservative and believe in a lot of weird shit. It's like, yeah, this is how the sausage gets made. No one wants to see it, but this is how it happens.
We also had some interesting stuff about like his planned Conan trilogy, where it's like, well, after he kills what's Doom? What's his name? Falset Doom, or what's it?
Also Doom, yeah.
After he kills him, it's like, well, things are kind of empty, and the next movies would be discovering like, well, after you've killed the person for revenge, what happens then, and kind of discovering like, having to have him run away from things and saying not be brave and like rediscover, other things that would make his life whole. And it's like, again, violence or whatever. It's like, okay, that sounds interesting.
We got to do Conan the Barbarian again, but my favorite part is when Conan's getting ready for the ambush, and he's like, Crom, I don't know if I ever really believed in you or anything else like this, but I need you with me. It's something like that.
Yeah.
It's like, I can hear someone getting ready to I could imagine in my mind, if I was like getting ready to have a violent sword fight with a bunch of people that I'm outnumbered, I may not win. Statistically, the odds are not in my favor. It's like talking to my God. It's like, I don't know at this point if you really exist or not. But if you do, like, prove it to me, bring me this victory or go to hell. It's like, that's awesome. That's really amazing. You don't hear that kind of, because people do have conversations like that with God all the time, whether it's Crom or the God of Abraham or whatever they believe in. And it's like, yeah, that's a rare moment of honor. And no one remembers that from Conan the Barbarian. I do, but it's like, yeah, that's amazing. It's like, Crom, I don't know if you're there or if you ever were, or if I ever believed in you, but and that's what I like about this guy. And it's, and I think it's like, yeah, this is why people like Quentin Tarantino too. Quentin Tarantino is a more polished version of John Milius, and he'd probably like tell me I'm a retard for saying that or whatever, but that's what I've always believed.
Well, I mean, it's also the interesting thing about like of the group that that Milius is associated with. They're all directors, and he was mostly a writer. He did directing too, but mostly he was like the best writer out of the group.
Yeah,
because like, I mean, like Lucas was more of a technician and a big idea guy, and then Spielberg was just the best all around talent, but still not a writer. I mean, he did write some, but not as much.
No, Spielberg just knows how to put a movie together structurally.
Yeah.
Like his best movie ever still is Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I'll argue that. People will say like, no, this was better. It's like, no, Close Encounters was his best movie because structurally how he put that together. Because I think that was written by like 500 people, and the way he put it together was amazing. I still to this day watch that movie and I'm in awe. And it's like a 70s movie. And it's like, this is amazing.
Well, I always forget that we do this, and so thus I didn't think of a thing. But we're sending a probe into space, containing the supercut of scenes from all the imperfect collection that is the Verhoeven Effect. And so for this movie, What scene do you send into space?
Well, to explain this to V'ger, I'm divided between two scenes. There's two scenes there, of course, and a lot of this has to do with riff tracks. So it's probably not the most original thought I've ever had, but it's either the Avenge Me scene. I have two, so it's either the Avenge Me scene at the re-education camp, or just the end of the movie when they're dying on the bench together. It's like, well, all we really ever had was that we were brothers. But that kind of ties back into dad. Like, avenge me. It's like, I did. And now I'm just dying with my brother on a bench, alone and forgotten in Colorado outside of Boulder or wherever the hell this was. So I can't decide which one. So yeah, I'm going to have to just like take a mulligan and it's like both because that's the cheap answer.
All right. I don't know why I always forget to do that, but I will. We'll hack that. I'll put that on the Spotify. There's some Spotify thing you can add a question to your podcast, and apparently people can click on it. I tried checking Spotify and it doesn't show up, so I don't know where it goes. But I wrote it in there, but
Well,
we'll see
whoever's
with audio.
pirating this material to write their next screenplay.
Well, if you like what you heard and how can you can find us at verhoeveneffect.com. You can on your podcast platform of choice, you can rate our podcast. You can rate it with whatever you want, but the only thing the algorithm listens to is the highest rating. Remember, you control the algorithm. The algorithm doesn't control you. We have listeners. We have listener support at verhoeveneffect.com, where you can support this podcast on a monthly stipend of either 99 cents, $4.99, or $9.99. You can find us at Twitter at Verhoeven Effect. You can find us at Facebook at Verhoeven Effect, and you can find us on YouTube at American Greed Factory. We watch both this show and that show live and unedited. And we have t-shirts at belowthecollar.com/Greed Factory. So for the Verhoeven Effect podcast, I'm Conlon.
And I'm Nathan.
Goodbye, America.